Everyone ready? Okay. Good.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Good evening, Littleton, and welcome to the Select Board meeting for February 22nd, 2021. We're going to begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we'll begin tonight's meeting with an organization and a reading of the mail. That will be followed by department and board updates and requests. We have a Park and Recreation and Community Education acceptance of a donation from Ed Walsh Foundation and Kimberly Abertelli from Find Your Place Real Estate Office, as well as Parks and Recreation, Community Education, Youth and Adult Sports Standards Update relating to 300 King Street basketball courts. That will be followed by Parks and Recreation and Community Education update on staff successful professional development. Elder and Human Services, we have acceptance of a donation of $529 from Ed's Weenies for Families in Need, $3,000 from the Henry Vincent Cooper Charitable Foundation for COA outreach assistance, $1,825.80 from Kristen Grimes for the TREAD program, and $12,500 from the First Baptist Church of Littleton for those in financial distress. We also have Littleton Community Television and ACT relative to streaming entertainment operators' use of public rights of way, and the Land Sale Committee meeting update. That will be followed by public input and members' updates. Then we will have at 7 p.m. a public hearing on the cable television ascertainment hearing. And that will be followed by the fiscal year 2022 capital budget discussions and potential recommendations for fiscal year 2022 capital projects to fund. At 7:50 p.m., we will have an annual special town meeting warrant for May 3rd, 2021 is the Springtown meeting, the date for the Springtown meeting. And we will be discussing the warrant articles to insert at that time. They include the Cemetery Commission, a proposed amendment to the town bylaw, Chapter 72 Cemeteries, Section 72-14, removal of cans and similar items, and Section 72-20, committing of illegal acts. We also have an insert of the following articles for the annual town meeting and standard articles, town officers, the annual report, bills of prior years, the fiscal 21 operating budget line item transfers, the fiscal year 21 capital plan amendments, the fiscal year 2022 revolving funds, and the fiscal year 2022 operating budget, fiscal year 2022 Park Recreation and Community Education Enterprise Fund operating budget, fiscal year 2022 capital items from available funds, fiscal year 2022 community preservation budget. We have the amendment to the personnel bylaw, stabilization fund, capital stabilization fund, and debt exclusion stabilization fund, and the senior citizens and veterans tax work-off abatement programs. That will be followed at 8 p.m. with select board discussions. We have a Veterans Heritage Grant opportunity. The board will be discussing potential projects to submit under that grant. We will have a discussion regarding the reorganization of the building department, a reorganization of the finance department, the senior property tax exemption, and the Littleton sewer project. At 8:30, we will have an update from the town administrator and assistant town administrator regarding Northbridge Host Community Agreement funds allocation, a dedication of revenue related to marijuana establishments, and discussion regarding electronic voting for town meeting. That will be followed by meeting minutes and approval of the board's minutes from January 16th, 2021 and February 8th, 2021. And then an anticipated adjournment. So I just wanted to mention to the board with respect to item 8C, the senior property tax exemption. I had invited State Representative James Arciero to come to tonight's meeting to discuss Westford's adoption of a revision to their senior property tax exemption program. He is more than happy to come meet with the board, but he asked if we could schedule this for our next board meeting as he's unable to attend tonight's discussion. And I think it would be beneficial to have him present for this discussion. He was going to invite a member of the Westford Select Board who was very instrumental in having that program brought before the legislation for the home rule petition that was recently passed for the town of Westford. So, Mr. Ansaldi, if you could maybe circle back with me, and we'll have this discussion with Representative Arciero at our next board meeting with respect to item, that was item 8D.
Madam Chair, a quick question.
Sure.
Is that I saw an article about a means-based tax. Is that what they were referring to?
It is. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the, they had passed it in Westford through the home rule petition.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if we could begin, Mr. Ansaldi, with a reading of the mail.
Sure. Madam Chair, there's one thing that I really wanted to talk about tonight, and that's the local Board of Health clinics that we did have. And I just want to go through that and what's happened since then. So Neshoba Associated Boards of Health was running the local COVID-19 vaccination clinics. That started 2 weeks ago when they notified us to that effect, and then we found out that they were only given 100 vaccines for the entire 16 communities that Neshoba covers. So that means Littleton's allocation of that was only 12. And having some conversations with yourself, Madam Chair, as well as other select board members, that I know that there was a lot of frustration that we were only getting 12. And with that, I tried to assemble a meeting with the 16 communities that Neshoba covers to discuss, the couple of things, the inequities in the vaccines that we were getting, and just 12 for our residents. So we had that meeting, and then we had a follow-up meeting with our state delegation. And, we wanted to stress, and we put together a letter that went to the governor and Secretary Sutters. And we wanted the state to realize that we had some issues that, number one, that the allocation for 100 total to Neshoba, that meaning Littleton gets 12, was unacceptable. We also were looking to advocate for a regional site here in our area. And we had also committed to helping and staffing. I know that the fire department's able to do some vaccinations. They're certified to do that. So we sent that letter off on the 16th of February. Well, lo and behold, the next morning, on the 17th, we received a letter from Secretary Sutters, which basically streamlined the distribution of vaccines. So that took away the local boards of health from having the ability to run local clinics, except the 20 communities that were are considered high risk. And those are mostly the cities around Boston. So with that, they took away that, in those cities, just so you know, the ones we're talking is Boston, Brockton, Chelsea, Everett, Fall River, Fitchburg, Framingham, Haverhill, Holyoke, Lawrence, Leominster, Lowell, Lynn, Malden, Methuen, New Bedford, Randolph, Revere, Springfield, and Worcester. So the state encouraged regional collaboration. So, but the guidelines that they put on that, which was to have the capacity to vaccinate minimally 750 individuals per day, 5 days a week, meet the administrative rate threshold of 85% and report doses within 24 hours, And this regional, we could not have just restricted to Littleton residents. We just didn't have the bandwidth, even with the other 16 communities joining together, to staff a regional vaccination center. Usually those are partnered with private organizations. So, we continue to fight, and really it's your direction to try to get something locally, but we're not really holding out much hope right now. So we took down on our website where residents could sign up for the Neshoba, because Neshoba Local Board of Health Clinic is no longer going to be running. Then we had to take that down. So right now, obviously, I think we're all disappointed that they're not having local vaccination sites, but residents should just really go to the state's website. They can call the information on the COVID 211 for some guidance there. But the governor's really directing everybody to the mass vaccination site. So, we'll continue to try to fight and advocate, but we're running into some roadblocks there.
Right. I mean, I appreciate your efforts, Mr. Ansaldi, on behalf of the town to reach out to surrounding communities and try to get, those regional collaboration, especially for a site right here in our own community. It's really frustrating and concerning, especially with our senior population, having to navigate now the websites that are in place to arrange for testing and to schedule these appointments. Is there anything that's being done through Elder and Human Services or any other efforts to kind of help residents through the process?
Yeah, we do have our outreach workers that would be more than willing to help where they can if somebody's having a hard time navigating the site. There's just, other than that, there's nothing locally that we can do as far as making them get the vaccines quicker, unfortunately.
Right.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I was going to say this during my board update. The housing authorities in Massachusetts have gotten some dispensation from the state. And in fact, Lisa Larrabee, the executive director of the Littleton Housing Authority, and Mandy, who's her executive assistant, have organized a clinic for all of the residents of the housing authority. And they're at this point, I think, waiting for some availability of the vaccine. But it's great because those residents, most of them are high risk. And so I was very heartened to hear that they had gone ahead and managed to get that together. I guess it was quite a feat of organization. But that is another way that's at least some residents are going to be vaccinated.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's it.
Any-
Madam Chair, for me.
Okay, thank you. So next we are on to item 3A, Parks and Recreation and Community Education. We have an acceptance of a donation from the Ed Walsh Foundation and Kimberly Abratelli from Find Your Place Real Estate Office.
And we have Alicia Day.
Hi, Alicia.
You muted, Alicia.
Muted. There we go. Sorry about
How are
that.
you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. So I'll try to go through these relatively quickly. But we were very honored to get 2 donations to the Youth Scholarship Fund. One is from the Ed Walsh Foundation, and the second was from Kimberly Albertelli from Find Your Place Real Estate. And so, those funds will go towards being able to assist families with things like Camp Tehadawon, swimming lessons, any of the programs that we run through Parks and Recreation. So the Park Commission did vote to accept both donations on Tuesday, February 9th. So it is before the Select Board to finish and decide if they would like to accept this donation as well.
Great. Thank you. And just wanted to say thank you to the Ed Walsh Foundation and Kimberly Arbatelli for their generosity and support of this program right here in our community. So thank you very much. And so we do have a motion.
Madam Chair, I'm smiled to see the name. I knew Eddie Walsh many years ago. He passed away. He used to work at the auto supply store and was hurt in an accident and lived at the as a disabled person at the elderly housing in Pine Tree Park for a number of years. And it's good to see his name being brought up in this fashion. And it's great to see Kim Albatelli helping out too. So with that, move the select board vote in accordance with its policy on solicitation and acceptance of monetary and non-monetary gifts for public purpose to approve a donation of the Parks, Recreation, and Community Education from the Ed Walsh Foundation in the amount of $1,000 and Kimberly Albatelli in the amount of $1,000 to PRCE's Youth Scholarship Fund.
Second.
Thank you. Wait
And
for it.
I believe it's Find Your Village. Kim Albertelli, Find Your Village.
Okay, I didn't see that on the motion, but you're right. That is the name of the business. Correct.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Glavy,
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus,
I,
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
and Cindy Napoli is aye. The motion is approved as written. Thank you. And we have an update next on the agenda regarding relating to 300 King Street basketball courts.
Yeah, so we had an update to the, standards of regulation for the youth and adult amateur sports through the Commonwealth. So currently we're in phase 3, step 1, as we were a while back. But they did make an update to this step 1. And essentially all of the risk categories are the same. So the change is that they've allowed some of the higher risk categories to, instead of only being able to play skills and drills, they are now able to also have games. The only thing that they're not allowed to do is hold tournaments. So, we discussed this. It happened the day before the Park Commission meeting for February. So they decided that, again, if the Select Board and the Board of Health were okay with it, that they would like to open the basketball courts to the public. But they wanted to be able to bring this up to both boards to be able to have that discussion and make sure that, everyone is in agreement.
Okay. And Alicia, do you know if the Board of Health has considered this
I
already
did.
or not yet?
So I did send a note to them that I would like to be on their agenda, but I've not heard back yet.
Okay, great. Are there any questions or comments for Alicia regarding this request from the board?
Madam Chair, I have one question,
Sure.
which is not necessarily for Alicia, but I have no problem with allowing the games to be played. I just am, the question always comes up, are we going to even try to enforce that people wear masks, and who's going to do it if so? I don't know who can answer that.
I don't know if that can be answered. That is part of the regulations, is that any sports that are being played, regardless of if they are outdoors or indoors in this category, that masks are required for all participants during active play. So, we've done what we have in the past and, put up signage out in the parks. Again, as far as enforcement goes, that I think would fall under the Board of Health, but I'm not sure what they would want to do in that situation or how we accomplish it. It's definitely been a tricky area for all of us in many ways.
I guess I was curious. Sorry, I was curious if there would be coaches and or adults there, or if this is just pickup games.
That's a great question, Matthew. So we were working with youth organizations prior to this. because they would have to actually turn in a entire regulations packet saying that, we as the coaches are responsible for the kids doing X, Y, and Z. And that was filed with our department and approved through the Park Commission. So this, I think what we're talking about specifically would be opening it to the public. So yes, those individuals could play pickup games if they so chose.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments from the board? So we're ready for a motion?
Okay, I'll move that the select board vote to support the decision of the Park Commission, decision to open the basketball courts at 300 King Street.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Glavy,
Aye?
Mr. Nordhaus,
Aye.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
and Cindy Napoli is aye, so the motion is approved as written. Great. And we have one other agenda item pertaining to Parks and Recreation. If you want to lead
We've got
us
a
into
lot
this,
going
Alicia. I know.
So I'm very pleased to say that Tim, our assistant director, has passed his national exam and obtained his certified Parks and Rec professional certification through the National Parks and Rec Association. It's a lot of hard work, honestly. It's kind of like taking the SATs again after, you haven't been in school for 15 years. So, it's a big deal for him to go through that process. So
So
we're
has
very
Tim
proud
been
of
an
him.
amateur up till now? Is he just gonna wing it?
No, it's, when all of our associations, we need to have our certifications. So this is the, the national version. But it makes him more official, I guess you could say.
Do we refer to him as Dr. Tim or Tim Esquire? Which is it?
You'll have to consult him. I'm not sure which he would go by.
Tell him congratulations.
I will do.
You'll have some title.
So in addition to that, I did want to mention that he's been nominated to be the vice president for the Massachusetts Recs and Park Association. So that's a really big honor. He has done so much work with the state and, our state association, working during the pandemic, trying to get regulations set so that we could get the beach open and programs and things like that. So this is a pretty big honor for him to be able to represent Parks and Rec departments for the state of Massachusetts. Commonwealth, sorry.
That's impressive. This is great. Good for him.
Yep.
Certainly professional development and personal growth is encouraged for all our town employees. And so it's nice to see him taking, the lead on that and the initiative. So it's quite an achievement. Thank you so much for bringing it to our attention. He happen to be on the call tonight or?
I don't think he's here tonight.
Okay.
He was out with the skiing program at Wachusett. So,
Okay. Well, certainly we'll send him out a note congratulating him, but thank you so much for making us aware of this. It's excellent news.
yeah,
Certainly.
you're welcome.
Great. Thank you. All right, good. So I think we are now on to item 3D, Elder and Human Services. I see we have Ashley Shaheen on the call with us.
Hello,
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. We have a couple donations to accept this evening.
We do, yes. But
Okay.
before we launch into that, Cindy, if I may, I just want to support Anthony's comment from earlier regarding the vaccine rollout, and
Yeah.
how confusing it is for many residents. And I just want to say again that our department is here to help and assist residents in whatever way we can to navigate the process. I know the state did roll out the resource scheduling line 211 for individuals who do not have access to the computer and to look for themselves. But even so, it's still a confusing process for
Right.
many. So I want people to feel comfortable reaching out to us, and we will do our best to support them in any way.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Sure. As far as gift acceptance, we've been so fortunate to receive such generous donations from the community. Ed of Ed's Weenies continues to donate his monthly tips to our department, and in January he donated $529, and that will go towards families in need put into our program and outreach account. We received $3,000 from Henry Vincent Cooper Charitable Foundation for Council on Aging outreach assistance. We had received $1,825.80 from Christine Rhymes for the TREAD program, tax relief for elderly and the disabled. And then lastly, we received $12,500 from the First Baptist Church of Littleton for those in financial distress, which will go towards the Council on Aging Emergency Assistance Fund.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who continues to be so generous with our Department of Elder and Human Services. I can't recall in years past this many donations for this department. So it's wonderful to see the community being so supportive.
It is. So if people are watching at home and you haven't connected with us, and if you could use extra assistance, especially now, please do reach out. We do have some criteria, but even still, reach out. Oftentimes people feel as though others could use the assistance more, but I don't want people to feel as though that's the case. So.
Excellent. Thank you. So I believe we have a motion.
Yes, Madam Chair, I move that the Select Board vote in accordance with its policy on solicitation and acceptance of monetary and non-monetary gifts for public purpose to approve donations to Elder and Human Services from $529 from Ed's Weenies for families in need, $3,000 from Henry Vincent Cooper Charitable Foundation for COA outreach assistance, $1,825.80 from Kristen Grimes for TREAD program, and $12,500 from First Baptist Church of Littleton for those in financial distress.
Second.
Excellent. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Glavy? Mr. Glavy?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Aye.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
And Cindy Napoli is aye. The motion is approved as written. Thank you very much, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley.
So next we are on to item 3E. We have Littleton Community Television, an act relative to streaming entertainment operators' use of public rights of way.
Madam Chair, it's 7 o'clock and the public hearing is going to start.
Oh,
at
okay.
7, so if we want to have open up the public hearing, please.
Okay. So we do have a motion for that, Mr. Glavy.
Okay, I will move that the Select Board vote to open the public hearing. And should one of us read the hearing notice, Anthony?
Sure, Paul. If you have it in front of you, or we can do that.
Yes, I do. I will, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, I will read the hearing notice then. The
Please.
Select Notice of Hearing, Town of Littleton Select Board, Littleton Cable Television Public Ascertainment Hearing. The Select Board, as statutory issuing authority for the Town of Littleton, Mass, will conduct a cable television public ascertainment hearing to be held virtually on February 22, 2021 at 7 p.m. via Zoom. The purpose of the hearing will be to review the performance of the current 2 cable television operators in Littleton, Comcast of Massachusetts 3, Inc., and Verizon New England, Inc. during each of their current license terms, and to hear testimony on future cable-related needs and interests of the Littleton community. Interested parties are encouraged to attend remotely and offer testimony on any cable-related matters. Any applications and reports to be considered at the hearing are available for public inspection at the Littleton Town Clerk's office and may be viewed during regular business hours by appointment only, as Town Hall is currently open by appointment only. Written comments may be submitted to the Littleton Town Administrator, and the address is given. So with that, I will move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. Glavy?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
What does aye?
Mr. Nordhaus?
Aye.
And Cindy Napoli is aye. So we are now, the public hearing is now open, and I do have a public hearing opening remarks to share. So good evening. My name is Cindy Napoli, Select Board Chair. I will be chairing this evening's public ascertainment hearing on behalf of the Select Board, which is the statutory issuing authority for the town of Littleton. Notice of tonight's hearing has been duly published in the Lowell Sun on January 29th, 2021, and February 5th, 2021. I will provide a copy of that notice for the public record. Tonight's hearing is mandated by the renewal provisions of the Federal Cable Act and applicable Massachusetts laws and regulations. The town has two different cable operators offering their services to Littleton residents: Comcast of Massachusetts III, Inc., and Verizon New England, Inc. The current cable license held by Comcast will expire on August 24th, 2021. The current cable license held by Verizon will expire on December 10th, 2021. The town is currently involved in the federally required ascertainment process. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to, 1, identify future cable-related community needs and interests, and 2, review the performance of Verizon and Comcast under their current cable television licenses. Once the town has gathered community input, it will separately inform Verizon and Comcast of the kinds of services and facilities that the town expects will be provided during any possible renewal term. Thus, the testimony that you will give this evening is very important, and I encourage all of you to speak candidly and specifically about any cable-related matters. Because this is a Zoom hearing, please indicate that you wish to provide testimony in order for your views to count and be a part of the official record by raising your hand. When you do testify, please give your name and address for the record. Because this is an ascertainment hearing for the town, I ask that you not pose direct questions for Verizon and or Comcast to answer. All testimony and or inquiries should be directed through the chair. Finally, I would like to clarify that while this is an ascertainment hearing on cable television matters, there are two related subjects over which the Select Board, as issuing authority, has no authority to regulate. The first is the rates that the cable operators charge for their services. The second is the commercial programming that the cable operators choose to show on their cable systems. I realize that these are two important issues for cable subscribers. While people are certainly free to comment on these matters this evening, it is nonetheless important for everyone to realize that the Select Board cannot mandate the specific rates that the cable operators can charge, nor can the Select Board mandate the specific commercial programming that the cable operators carry on their Littleton cable system. Those are the introductory comments. I will first call on members of the public to testify. After that, I will call on the Cable Advisory Committee and other town officials and department heads to provide testimony.
Any members of the public, Joe?
No one currently has their hands raised.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I
Thank you.
believe you have some Littleton Cable Advisory Committee members present, so if they want to provide testimony next.
Sure.
Bill Vales, the chairman.
Hi,
Good evening.
good evening. How are you? Thank you for inviting me. I have a prepared statement that I'd like to read, if I may.
Certainly.
Okay. My name's William Vales, Bill. And as the chairman of the Select Board indicated, the purpose of this hearing is to, 1, review the performance of Littleton's cable providers, Comcast and Verizon, under their current cable television licenses, and 2, to identify future cable-related community needs in the successor license. Speaking for the Cable Committee, we feel that Comcast and Verizon have met all the requirements of the current license and provided credible service at an industry standard cost to its subscribers in Littleton. While there may be programming choices that some may like to change, and we would all prefer a lower cost for the service, these are not issues that, under current law, we can address in the negotiations. I and other committee members may present some of the needs that we will include in the request for proposal, which will be sent to Comcast and Verizon when this hearing closes. Some of the needs are, one, that the successor licenses contain all the regulatory and compliance standards present in the current license and at the current levels. For examples, performance bond, damages, indemnification, liability insurance, and any other relevant items. Number two, that Comcast and Verizon explain their procedures for resolving service outages for subscribers and what Comcast and Verizon considers an outage and the reductions in rates from an outage. Also, what steps Comcast and Verizon will take to resolve subscribers' complaints in a timely manner, and how Comcast and Verizon will inform subscribers of these policies. Item 3, we want to ensure that Comcast and Verizon continue to provide the 3 current channels for public, educational, and government access, referred to as PEG, that the channel numbers will not be changed without discussion with the town, and that no portion of any channel is taken for use by Comcast or Verizon to run commercial programming without negotiations with the town. Item 4, that the town, Comcast, and Verizon undertake a review of the current density requirements for providing cable services to residents to ensure that they are not unreasonably denying service to those who want it. That's the end of my prepared statement. I do have 2 other items that constitute additional functional requirements that we've gleaned from people in the town.
Okay.
And those items are closed caption functionality. There's some people in the town that have indicated that that's a desirable function. And item 2 is program guide functionality. It'd be nice to know what's on and when it's on. And that's the end of my prepared statement, so I thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Bales. Are there any other committee members who wish to speak? Okay. Any members of the select board that wish to comment? No.
Seems like you and Mr. Vales covered it pretty well.
Right, I agree. Okay, so are there any representatives from Verizon or Comcast on the call this evening? No? Okay,
Like a motion to close the hearing, Madam Chair?
please.
Okay, I will, so moved.
So, if I may, Madam Chair, if you just read that highlighted section,
Yeah, I do have the concluding remarks, Mr.
Yes,
Rosselli.
please, yeah.
Just 1 second, Mr. Glavy.
Sure.
So there's no further testimony that concludes tonight's public hearing. I will keep tonight's hearing open for 7 days in order to receive additional testimony. Interested parties are encouraged to submit written testimony on any renewal-related issue discussed tonight, or indeed regarding any overall cable-related issue. Written testimony or comments may be submitted to the Office of the Select Board by Monday, March 1st, 2021. Those comments should be sent to the Office of the Select Board, Littleton Town Hall, 37 Shattuck Street, P.O. Box 1305, Littleton, Massachusetts, 01460. If you have any questions about tonight's hearing or the cable television renewal process, please call the Select Board's office at 978-540-2460. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight's public ascertainment hearing.
I'll second Mr. Glavy's motion.
Yeah, so my motion then would be at the expiration of the period that the chair just described to close the hearing.
Second.
Great. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Glavy,
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste,
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus,
Aye.
and Mr. Knox. And Cindy Napoli is aye. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Vales.
Thank you.
Okay, so
We're back
We were
on
on-
3E.
3E, yep, Littleton Community Television, an act relative to a streaming entertainment operator's use of public rights of way.
And we do have Mark Corey who is with us. Mark?
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
So there are two bills that are being presented in the legislation of the state and Senate of Massachusetts, and they pertain to what they call leveling the playing field. And basically, if you get, just for an example, if you get Netflix in your house, in order to get Netflix in your house, Netflix piggybacks off the lines that are run on the poles from either Comcast or Verizon. That's how you usually get Netflix in your house, through some sort of vehicle like that. Well, Netflix does not pay for the use of those poles, yet they get the benefit of being able to offer a product in people's homes. So this bill, the legislation, it will charge a fee to the streaming companies like Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and other streaming things that utilize town property and the poles and things like that to get into people's homes. So out of the, I think, 5% fee that will be charged to the streaming companies, 10% or 20% goes to the state, and 40% goes to the municipalities, and 40% would go to the local access stations, meaning LCTV. And this is a way for us to capture some revenue for in this day where people are cutting the cord from cable. You know, that's how we get our revenues, through cable subscribers. And as more and more people are going to streaming services, this is a way to hopefully to recoup some of those things, some of those lost revenues. So I'm asking that the selectmen would support that, because also, as I said before, 40% also goes back to the town. So, you know, people have to pay to do business in town in other areas, and they should have to pay through the streaming as well. And that's the gist of the legislation.
Okay.
Let the debate begin.
So Madam Chair, there is a letter that we worked with Mark on from the Select Board to our state delegation in support of the legislation that's currently before them. And then the second act that Mark would be looking for is the selectmen to take the motion to support a formal motion so we can pass that on to mass access.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this topic? Mr. DeCoste?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. Although I love the opportunity for us to get some revenue out of it, I think it's a slippery slope, and it's going to create some precedents. I mean, anybody that shops on Amazon, now Amazon's going to have to pay. I mean, you can't get access to Amazon without having an internet connection. The internet connection is coming from the pole from the ISP. So I'm kind of torn here as a consumer and a resident. I don't want to get whacked on one end, but I understand that the benefits to LCTV and to the municipality. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, sort of. You know, it's looking at it from a consumer standpoint, I just imagine what's next, and you know what's going to be taxed next, and just another opportunity to whack us. You know, ultimately we're going to pay more for every service because that's going to be passed on to us. So, but I'm glad to see that we do end up getting what I'd consider a pretty substantial piece of the pie. And I do appreciate all the work that Mark and his team have done working on this. So I'm not saying that I am in opposition of it, but I do feel as though it is a slippery slope, and I think it's going to bring us down a wormhole that is going to cost us at every turn.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Mark, this is more towards you. Just due to my ignorance, when you say Netflix and Hulu and Disney, whatever, that all comes to us by cable?
You have to get that through some sort of subscription, either through your phone, which is wireless. Some people do it that way, but these would be the ones that come through the polls, people who have Comcast in their home for their internet, and then they get streaming services through that internet that aren't related to Comcast per se. You get a separate bill for those services.
Thank you.
And Chuck, I agree with what you're saying. I have the same dilemma, frankly, but those prices are going to go up anyway.
Right, you're right.
And they've always been going up. And I think even Netflix went up starting January. So now they're, at least when they go up, it's coming back, some of it.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
This is very concerning. I don't agree. And again, I'm a huge fan of LCTV. I think you guys have been really just amazing, especially during the pandemic, and helped this town out in ways I can't even describe. But I already pay, Verizon for my internet, and now I would be paying Verizon again for content on that internet. And this might be the result of the end of net neutrality, but in my opinion, as a tech geek, the good thing about the internet is it's free and open, and it was built on a premise that basically everybody gets equal shares to use the pipes. And I don't think that we should start charging for that. I think, as Chuck said, it is a very slippery slope. Where does it end? As soon as when every piece of information is taxed on that, the prices are going to keep going up. And while I don't see any way that prices are going to go down, I'm not sure we should encourage the carriers by allowing them more ways to charge us money. So I hope that we could find some other method of supporting LCTV and the town.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
All these are valid points. Of course, all these thoughts go through my mind too. The reality is, with 5G coming on, this next license that we have coming up with Verizon, they're not signing 15-year licenses anymore. This is probably going to be a 5-year license, because that's what they're doing now, with an option to get out halfway through. Because when 5G comes on and they start petitioning to put up boxes every other telephone pole all around town, then not only Verizon will switch to that type of service, but other companies are going to come in besides Verizon and Comcast and want to use the poles. So there'll be methods to charge for that as well. But like everything, there's a price for this kind of luxury, I guess you can say. These are definitely first world problems that we have when you look at the scope of things. But anyway, with right now we're negotiating cable contracts with these two providers, how we get our funding. When 5G opens up and the government looks like it's going to be saying that you have to offer any company who comes in use of your poles to put up their equipment. The cable companies are going to come back and say, why did we sign agreements with the towns? And they want to get out. And there goes our funding. So in some ways, we're looking at either continuing the funding through ways like this, or eventually we'll have to ask the town to take on funding the department, just like you do the police, the fire, the highway, down the road. But I know these are down the road issues, but this is one of those things. We've already noticed a slight even though cable prices are going up and still go up, we've noticed that our revenue has started to decline slightly. And so, this is just a method. If the town doesn't agree with it, I can understand, but it's just, people trying to think outside the box in the world that we live in, community TV people live in, just to try to keep afloat.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the board about this?
Can I just ask a point of clarification? Mark, would it be fair to say, just to get back to your original statement, that this legislation would mandate that the streaming services who use the polls would basically be paying just as the current cable providers are paying, but presently they are not?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? So we do have a motion prepared.
Yeah, I'll let not knowing whether there's a majority there or not, I will read the
Right.
motion, make the motion, and we'll see where it goes from there. I will move that the select board vote to support Mass HS 1440 and SD 834, an act relative to a streaming entertainment operator's use of public rights of way. The proposed legislation would impose a 5% fee on digital streaming providers which use Littleton public rights of way in order to sell their products to Massachusetts and Littleton residents.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote on this. Mr. Glavy,
Aye.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus,
No?
Mr. DeCoste.
Come on, Chuck.
No, I respect the LCTV group, and if this is something that Mark and the LCTV commission support, then I am going to vote in favor of it.
Okay. Cindy Napoli is an aye. She's going to vote in favor of it. So the motion is
Sorry, Matthew.
approved. 4 in favor, 1 opposed.
I would love to find a way to help you
Agreed.
help fund LCTV through the town rather than doing this.
Yeah, no. Good
I'll take
points.
you up on that.
Good points.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Great,
Board.
thank you. Next on the agenda, we have an update from the Land Sale Committee meeting.
I'm going to turn it over to our assistant town administrator who's done so much work on this for quite a while.
Hello, everyone. Haven't had a chance really to say good evening at this point. So just wanted to have it for an update. So within the board's packet provided meeting minutes from Land Sale Committee, a meeting that happened on February 10th. This was in regards to an application that was submitted and first discussed by the board back on August 10th. Reason why I just wanted to give you an update is that looking at the Select Board's regulation under Policy 18 entitled Sale of Town-Owned Property Policy and Procedure. In considering these applications, the Select Board is to hold a public hearing before acting on the committee's recommendation. So what we'd like to do is schedule this for an upcoming meeting, such as March 8th, in order to provide notice to abutting properties and to have the board formally consider the recommendation of the Land Sale Committee. The policy does indicate a number of topics that the recommendation needs to address. It was pretty much all addressed within the meeting minutes. It's just more of a formal step that then the Select Board policy details that process for consideration of that land.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Layden. And I believe that this applicant had appeared before the board, and at that time, the board had asked that they appear before the Land Sale Committee. So it is a continuation of a
Yep.
prior discussion that the board had. So there's a motion before us to schedule this for a public hearing on March 8th.
Madam Chair, I move that the Select Board vote to schedule a public hearing for March 8, 2021 at 7:30 PM to consider the request of Brendan McGuire, 15 Manchester Drive, for the purchase of town land U14-101 and U14-102.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Glady,
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus,
Aye.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste,
The coast is aye.
and Cindy Napoli is aye. And so we will schedule a public hearing to consider this request on March 8th, 2021. And next on the agenda, we have public input and members' updates. Do we have anyone for public input this evening?
Currently, we have no hands raised.
Okay. So we'll go on to member updates. We'll start with Mr. Glady,
Nothing for me.
Mr. Nordhaus.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to commend, the last couple of meetings, we've talked about the snow plowing, and I wanted to add my 2 cents and commend Chris Stoddard and the Highway Department for doing an excellent job in keeping the roads clear and the sidewalks. I think he doesn't get enough credit for the way that department runs, and I just wanted to make it public. Thank you, Chris, et al. Also, the drivers are very, very nice and polite, I find.
Great timing, Matthew. The Santa just went by my house.
Excellent. Mr. DeCoste, do you have anything to share?
I don't. I actually have to step off for a few minutes here, guys, but
Okay.
I'll be back. I'll jump back in.
Okay. Mr. Knox?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to share with the board that I did attend the planning board meeting this past week, and they did have a discussion regarding retail or marijuana delivery licenses in the town of Littleton. It was an interesting conversation. It's certainly a complicated topic. So they've asked that we convene a few members from the select board and from the planning board to just try to get a better grasp of the concept. We actually asked town council just to provide sort of a grid so we can get a better handle visually what this proposal would look like and mean for the town of Littleton. So those discussions are going to be taking place, and they're going to be revisited at the planning board meeting on I believe it's March 4th. And the other thing I just wanted to mention with the planning board was they're planning on holding a public hearing and a discussion regarding the Littleton Station project. That will be on March 18th. We're encouraging residents to tune in to that meeting on March 18th and actually visit the town's website as well under the planning board tab. So if you want any more information about the Littleton Station project, which is a development that's being proposed on Foster Street adjacent to Littleton Station, it's an affordable housing and economic development initiative. So I'm hoping that residents will start to research and pay attention to that project. It's something that there's going to be a zoning change that's going to be coming before the residents at Maytown meeting. So the sooner that residents become involved and educated about the project, I think the better it will be for the community and for everybody. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share that. And so next, we have conducted our public hearing. So next on the agenda, we have fiscal year 22 capital budget. We have a discussion about recommendations on capital projects to fund.
Yeah, Joe, you want to let Cheryl and Sean in?
Yep, in the process. Was this also going to be with FinCom? I see a number of members that are here as well.
So the select board was first going to go through the capital
Okay.
items, and then if there was conflicting, they needed to discuss something with FinCom. I know FinCom posted for a joint meeting. Not necessarily necessary at this point until the select board has an opportunity to go through it.
Okay. So the recommendations from FinCom are attached on this grid, Mr. Ansaldi?
Yes. So Sean, if you want to call up like you did for, or Cheryl, if you want to start, I'm sorry. I just saw you.
Oh, no, no worries. Madam Chair, if you would like us to do the same process that we did with Finance Committee, we had Sean bring up the spreadsheet so you could look at it live. And as you went through the capital articles, he would just put your recommendations in there as you were going through them. So if you would like him to do that, we certainly can do that with the select board, if you so please.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Right. But just to give you some background, so FinCom initially kind of went through and everyone's top priority. They selected those and then went to the secondary priority. And that's, how they went through and made their decisions. There's two highlighted in yellow that are school articles that they had additional questions on, which they did receive an email from Steve Mark with some explanations on those two capital articles. And then Sean, if you don't mind scrolling up to the top area a little bit here. I did want to point out that the fire department has rescinded two of their capital articles, and we'll discuss this a little bit more in March 8th. But the chief did bring to us that the ambulance fund was going to potentially have some difficulty making their $650,000 transfer for FY22 due to issues with COVID and the revenues not hitting what we expected. So given that revenue loss, the fire chief elected to rescind those capital articles because of that. But like I said, we can discuss that more on March 8th.
Okay. Okay. So you want us to just go through these one by one, Cheryl, or?
Yeah, I mean, so that's how Finance Committee did it. They just kind of went down the list and started with the number one priority for each department.
Okay.
And decided, if they wanted to recommend that or not. And then they went back to the top of the list and went through number two. So if that's
Okay.
how you'd like to do it, or you could just literally go down each one. Whatever you choose.
Okay. Does the board have any preference on how we proceed? We could just go line by line,
I jump in, Cindy.
please.
The only thing that stood out when I was reviewing the packet was we have a bunch of times we have major equipment repairs as a separate line item. And I just wanted to ask Cheryl or anybody from the FinCom, I think Alan is on or not, if there's any other mechanisms through which we can address that, other than lining up $25,000 or more under a general maintenance budget or a major capital or equipment repair budget. Is there another way that we can handle that, Cheryl, or is there a better vehicle through which we could do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in an ideal scenario, instead of having them be capital articles with money that just might or might not get used and keep rolling over year over year over year, to actually have the Finance Committee Reserve Fund have the funding in it. So rather than have this in our capital fund, it would be part of the Finance Committee Reserve Fund. And if, say, the fire department needed a transmission because it was an emergency repair, they would go in front of the select board and the Finance Committee and say, I need funding for XYZ transmission. This was unexpected. So I think in an ideal scenario, rather than having them in the capital plan, we would have the funding in the Finance Committee Reserve.
It gives us a lot more flexibility to, kind of have it available to us for major equipment repairs, and it's not specific to PRCE or the police or the fire or
Right.
the highway.
Exactly.
Yeah. I just think that I like that idea. I'd rather see us do something like that where we put it in the FinCom reserve. And that's another question, but I don't know if it's the appropriate time or not. And like to see the FinCom reserve kind of stay at the level that we've had it at in the past, because we don't know what we're going to come up against. And that's a good place for us to keep that money, because we do have the flexibility of having a joint meeting and determining whether or not we can allocate those funds. So that's another thing that I don't know if you want to address that, or if Alan might want to address the level at which we could/should maintain that
Definitely.
FinCom reserve.
Yep. No, I agree with you, Chuck. I think, we had upped it last year because it was fairly low. It's always historically been pretty low. And I think that was a good strategy for us to be able to, for these unexpected expenses. So I agree with you. I think if we can keep it at that level, provided Finance Committee is supportive of it, that would be my recommendation as well, too.
Okay,
Thanks.
it's a good point, Chuck. Okay, so let's just start at the top, just like FinCom did. Accounting, chart of accounts redesign. Any questions or comments from the board on that request?
In a general sense, Madam Chair, are we keeping an eye out, or is Joe Layden or somebody to see if there's any other board members or department representatives that are looking to advocate here? If they are, fine. If not, that's fine too. I just want to make sure we're not overlooking somebody that's waving away looking to speak.
Right. Good point, Mr. Glavy.
Madam Chair, this is Joe. I am keeping an eye out on the attendee participants. So if someone did need to raise their hand to explain something, or if was looking for additional feedback, I'm keeping my eye out.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, great, thanks. So there's no opposition to the request from the accounting department. We have a new line item in here from the Select Board regarding space needs assessment of the current library space for $50,000. Any questions or comments from the board on that request?
Yeah, can someone explain it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. I also don't know where this came from.
Yeah, thank you.
Same.
So as we continue to use LLB, we are getting to that point where we're running down the amount that was originally budgeted. So there is gonna be continuous need, especially once the library vacates. So this would allow us to have the architectural services and funds to look at that space and others as it frees up.
Okay. Well, currently we're moving forward with the senior center project utilizing LLB services for that, correct?
Correct, right. And that's going to be, I think it's later on, we discussed we were freeing up some prior capital money, $80,000 that was going to be used for the feasibility study for the senior center, for his new senior center.
Right. So Chuck and I have been spearheading the space needs on behalf of the Select Board. This request, I don't recall discussing it. I don't know, Mr. DeCosta, if you recall. So yeah, I don't. We as a board haven't discussed this, and I'm not personally in favor of having this in here at this time. I don't know how other members of the board feel about it, but I just figure, our focus right now should be on the senior center.
I was going to say that. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
shift that
Especially with
50,000. Good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it was so little, there's no support documentation. It kind of looks like a number grabbed out of the air, and it's unclear as to what it's gonna be spent on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I have a question. I know that we did a very comprehensive space needs assessment. I'm curious, was there nothing in that we could use in order to help us guide us through what the library can be used for?
I'm going to jump in if you don't mind, Cindy.
No, go ahead.
It was basically used as a library at that point in time, Matthew. There was no line of sight to see if we could put Park and Rec there, or the town offices, or the building department, or anything like that.
Mhm.
But I think all of that can be done without the services, frankly, of a design firm or an architectural firm at this point. I think we can reuse space in that once the library is vacated, there's going to be a whole bunch of open space. And I'd rather, if we get to a point where we say, you know, room 103 is going to move to where the periodicals are right now, we'll have all of our our selectmen meetings up there, and town administrator's office will be where Sam's office is now. We can kind of do that sort of on the fly in the back of an envelope using the services of some talented people that we have in town right now, whether they're you know, Mr. Mullen or Chris Stoddard, or I don't know. I think that we could kind of do some interim stuff, and then at that point, if we determine that, you know, the seniors get their space and they vacate that space, we could do kind of a larger scale evaluation of the space needs.
Right. Yeah,
I'd rather
I
see
agree.
this $50,000 go directly to that $80,000 you were just referencing, Anthony, relative to the seniors.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, we're waiting back for the quote, Chuck, from LOB to let us
Yeah.
know what total feasibility is. So
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. So I mean,
Sorry.
so what I'm hearing, this to me is not a priority of the board. We can,
Madam Chair, can I have one comment?
sure.
The figure might come out of the sky, I understand that, but we will have that coming up soon, about the use of the former library. And I wouldn't have a problem with having that money put away when the time comes, so we can go right after it and have it, have a professional take a look at what could be done there. So I wish the board had just talked about this before. That's my concern.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, we haven't discussed this at all. So,
It just shouldn't be the number one priority. I'd say if
Right.
there's going to be number one priority, I think we've all mentioned the seniors would be the number one priority. If we were,
Right.
It's a need that's going to be this sooner or later, though.
It is, but it's, again, I don't think would be at the top of our list, right?
I mean, and to Chuck's point, I'd rather look back at the information that we've already gathered. And, you know, take a look at that space. When is the library going to be vacating? Definitely. When will that space be available?
The most recent library building committee had the library itself being completed end of September. So you're talking about then over a 2-month process, you know, yes, through October, probably into November, as far as turning all the space over.
Okay.
We'll be halfway through the year and it's still not going to be really fully out of there.
Right.
I'm not I agree with Joe Knox's, you know, earlier point that, you know, we're going to have to face this sooner rather than later. I would just hate to see this line item be the reason we didn't fund some other, you know, more immediate concern.
Right. Yeah. And especially, I mean, we haven't discussed this, so I would just rather put this to the side for now, and then revisit it.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. So now we're on to cemetery expansion phase 1. Is there any questions or comments from the board about that request? Any opposition to it? Fire, Cheryl already mentioned that the utility truck request has been withdrawn at this time. Fire major equipment repair for $25,000. Or any questions or comments from the board on that request?
I'll go back to my earlier point. I'd rather see us hold off on any major equipment repair funds being allocated to any given department and give the Board of Selectmen and the Select Board and the FinCom the flexibility to move those funds where they're needed. I mean, if fire needs $40,000, to Cheryl's point, if there was a transmission or something like that needed to be done and it's going to cost $40,000, we'd be able to pivot pretty quickly with having the FinCom reserve fund having all of the funds in it. I think that'd be a better use of those funds and just pool them all together. And that way, at the end of the year, if they're not used, they're still in the FinCom's reserve fund. They're not, not that any of our people do this, but I think the human nature might be, we still have $5,000 in the repair account. Is there anything that we need?
Right. I mean, I personally like that suggestion. I don't know if any other members of the board have thoughts on it.
I like that idea. I'm just trying to think offhand if that causes us any problems we're not anticipating, but if we were, I'm sure by now somebody would be out there howling.
Okay. All right, so we'll just table that for consideration to move it to the FinCom reserve. And do that with all of the repairs? Is that what you're proposing, Mr. DeCoste?
That is what I'd propose. Yeah. For
Okay.
I think there
I
was
think
one
it's a
for
good suggestion. It makes sense to me. I don't know.
Do
Okay.
the same thing with highway, Chuck?
PRCE, highway, police, fire. Sure.
But what did
As long as FinCom understands the intent, we don't want to place that
Absolutely.
money there and then they sit on it and say,
Absolutely.
oh, no, you can't have that.
That's on Cheryl. She's got to figure that part out.
Right.
I just want to make sure we're not going back. I believe that I know that Scott asked us to move that into a fund because he was having trouble getting the funds out for the large repairs from wherever it was before. So I want to make sure we're not creating the same problem by moving it into another reserve fund.
Madam Chair, this is Joe. We do have Chief Wadzinski and Alicia Day that were raising their hands to
Okay.
That will
speak
come
about
up.
this.
Perfect.
If
Go
I
ahead,
may,
Judy.
I was going to say, go ahead.
I don't disagree with what you guys are talking about, by keeping that type of a reserve. The only concern that comes to me right away is, my reference is this year. It's been a difficult year with a lot of mechanical issues with the fleet. But is if there are large items, the timely fashion that would be able to come to the FinCom and the board to get approvals for a significant repair to try to go ahead and get that done. If it would take several weeks or a month to have a piece of apparatus out of service, in some cases, especially if it was an ambulance, it would be a significant delay.
Okay.
I think you could make that argument, Chief, and we would, we'd make sure that we made it happen for you. I don't think that, the intent is not to be obstructionist. That just the intent is to have better control over our finances, frankly.
Okay.
You might want to formalize what that emergency process would be, have Cheryl work up something so that everybody understands it going into it, the department heads, the select board, the FinCom, et cetera. Just so we don't get caught up. Our intents can be in the best places, but we want to make sure in practice it works.
Right, to the chief's point. Okay.
Thank you.
Alicia?
Yeah,
Did you
I
have-
was gonna say, I think it's a great idea, but if it was something that we worked on like over the course of the next year, so that we did have a process in place that, everyone, all the department heads that use this type of fund were able to understand what, the process was to make everything happen, rather than, like Chief had said, we end up in a situation where we need to be able to have funds cover something in a very quick manner, and we're still trying to figure that out. So
Right.
that would be my suggestion, is that, if there was a way to go through this year and then try to make an implementation in the next budget season.
Okay.
I'd like to get Cheryl's input on that just to see, I don't see any good reason not to do it this year. And then we can tweak it if we find that there's opportunities to improve it or other ways to make it work. But to Paul's point, have Cheryl, kind of formalize it and figure out how we do manage. We can, within 48 hours, we can call a meeting and we can do a joint meeting with FinCom as long as we have a quorum of each to
Right.
make this happen if it is, with any emergency. And I think that we've demonstrated that we're, we can be pretty nimble and move pretty quickly.
Right. No, I agree with you, Mr. DeCoste. Cheryl, does she have any initial thoughts on that? I don't see that the process is that complicated, that it would hold up anything, to Mr. DeCoste's point personally. So, but I do agree that to Mr. Glavy's point, that we do need to solidify what that process is, just so that we don't back ourselves into a corner unexpectedly. So we can have that discussion with Cheryl. before this is finalized, I don't see why we can't, but I do think it's a good suggestion worth pursuing. So we'll continue with
Yeah, I
that
think
thought.
it's worth for the discussion with FinCom.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Okay. All right. So the 2021 dump truck for the highway department, was there any thoughts from the board on that request? Okay.
If we can get every department to use equipment for since 1993 and just replace it every
I know.
27 years, that
Right.
would be doing okay.
Yeah. And the other request was for the 2021 Ford F-350. Any thoughts from the board, opposition from the board on that request?
FinCom didn't suggest that we fund that. Is that correct? Are you talking about line 11?
No, I'm actually line 3 under highway.
Oh, yeah, sorry, line 3. But
That was their third priority. Like that's what that is, right?
It's
To
line
Matthew's point, FinCom is not recommending that one.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, I gotcha.
It's not in column F.
I gotcha. Okay, so what's the board's thought on that? We're going to follow FinCom's recommendation?
I think as a first pass, that would be a good way to go. If we
Okay.
discover we have a whole bunch of money at the end, then we can go back
Okay.
and spend it.
I'd
Okay,
like to ask Chris about it too. A pickup truck with 99,000 miles on it, the kind of wear that they put in it might need to be replaced.
Ooh.
Especially if it's a plow.
Yeah.
okay. So we'll,
Yeah, the-
If we're not taking that space needs money, we have $50,000 to go somewhere.
Doesn't mean
or
we have to
save.
spend it.
Right, I know, I agree.
all right, so we'll put a hold on that. And next we have the items from the PMBC, Shaker Lane, the long-term facility planning study. That was recommended by FinCom. Any thoughts from the board on that request? And then there was $800,000 for the high school wing cafeteria roof replacement.
I have a question about that, a more general one about the large ticket items. What's the, how are those covered if there's a cost overrun or it goes way over budget? Like what's the contingency?
It's a good question.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
So I think it would depend on how much it was an overrun. So, depending, sometimes things like that would get covered in the operating budget if it was, nothing of substance. But if it was something of substance, then they would have to come back to town meeting, whether it be special town meeting or whatnot, and request additional capital funds.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for you, Cheryl, too. It's just glancing over the whole spreadsheet here, that one item, which is the funding source, is cash capital, seems to be, pretty much the equivalent of everything else on there. But the other comparable item, the design services for the senior center, is put in the ban. What's the recommendation? What's the logic behind the recommendation that this $800,000 item is being funded out of cash, but the $1 million item is being funded out of borrowing?
Sure, Paul. So the thought process as to why we were doing the borrowing on the design was because that's part of a much larger project that we will be doing a permanent borrowing on. So, typically with those types of projects, we borrow, or we have in the past borrowed the design money because it gets rolled into the larger permanent borrowing.
Yeah, I'm not so much concerned on that one. I'm just surprised that we're be funding this $800,000 item as a cash. We've got the cash for it?
We do, yes. I mean, depending on obviously your other selections, but I mean, we had 1.8 million, but now that we've subtracted out some of the funding needed for the change with the ambulance transfer, you have 1.6 million in cash capital available to spend.
Mhm. So roughly half of our capital expenses is on that item.
Right, correct.
Okay.
If that's your recommendation.
Yeah, no, it's just trying to make sense of it.
Sure.
Okay. Any other further questions or comments on that line item? Okay, so the next three items on the list were not recommended by FinCom. Does anyone disagree with their recommendation on the next three items from the PMBC regarding the schools? No? Okay. Now we're on to this, on the second page, that also, they did not recommend the parking lot repaving project for the schools, the high school. So now we're on to the police department. We have a request for a Ford Cruiser. Was there any thoughts from the board? That was recommended by FinCom. And then we have Park and Rec major equipment repairs. Ongoing maintenance for all parks. Was there any thoughts from the board on that request? And then we have statistically valid survey, request from the Park and Rec. Any thoughts on that request from the board? Okay, and then we have the transfer station, a stabilization transfer to start an account for truck replacement in 20 years. That was a recommendation from FinCom. Any thoughts on that? Then we have two new requests from the Highway Department. One is with respect to roads, or actually one request from the Highway Department on roads. Design costs for the intersection of Beaverbrook and Great Road. Are there any thoughts from the board on that request? Okay, and then Elder and Human Services, design services for the new senior center, which we just discussed. And then we have 4 requests with respect to the school, Russell Street School phone system replacement, central office phone system replacement, maintenance van replacement, and middle school phone paging system replacement. That last request with respect to the paging system replacement, there's a note here for follow-up on that. But the first 3 school replacement item requests, any thoughts from the board on that? Those items? Okay. And then lastly, we have middle school, the card access replacement and the Shaker Lane School paging system. The card access replacement was not recommended by FinCom. Does anyone on the board have any contrary thoughts on that request? And then the final.
Not specifically, Madam Chair, but at some point, if given the fact that the FinCom has made some judgments here on what to recommend, is we're going to have them speak to this after? Is that the plan, or ask someone from their board to speak?
They did.
Oh, on what they recommended and did not recommend?
Yeah. Just any backup, on it. I mean, I see what they're recommending. I'm just wondering if there's any story that we need,
Right, yeah,
They have posted as a meeting, so I believe that they're in the waiting room, members of FinCom.
oh, okay, all right, good. All right, so they did not recommend that request, and then the final request with the Shaker Lane paging system, there was a follow-up note there as well. So maybe we can invite FinCom in and just see if there's anything that they wanted to speak to specifically with respect to their recommendations. Mr. McCray on the call.
down in here? I know he had a family thing. He wasn't sure he was going to be back in time. Is he not?
Okay. So we just went through the list and made reference to the recommendations from FinCom. Was there anything specific that the board should know, the select board should be aware of?
No, these particular items on the school items, I mean, they were their priority 4, 5, and 6. I mean, so it was really a matter of on their priorities. And I think there was some follow-up on one school, one versus another, and should they all be the same? And I think we got satisfactory responses that it was okay to do these individually and that they didn't all have to be done together.
Okay, that's helpful because I do remember a similar discussion at one point with respect to that. And the only other question maybe really was the discussion amongst the board about moving the major equipment repairs into the FinCom reserve and trying to figure out a process to address those requests differently than the way we've been doing it historically. I didn't know if you had any comments on that initially. Betsy?
It was mentioned in our meeting, and I kind of like that idea, but we didn't discuss it or approve it or not, or I don't think, unless there's somebody else on the board that remembers. I don't remember us going into any detail about it. So I think we should talk about it more to address the need or the concern about making sure we can be responsive.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Okay, so are there any other questions from the select board on this at this time?
Just a general comment, for the public more than anything is that, those items that we're not recommending now aren't necessarily items that we don't support. It's just, they get put on your radar screen 1 year and sometimes it takes a year or two for them to get addressed. And that's part of the normal course.
Right. Okay. All right, good. Are there any other questions or comments from the board on this?
Is there anybody else from FinCom who wanted to speak on this as well? We are posted, so if they wanted to speak.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, great, thanks. Okay, good. So, Cheryl, do you have enough information from the board at this time?
Yes, I do. Thank you. The only one item I did want to mention is that I believe the PRCE equipment maintenance was one of the items that you want FinCom to discuss being part of the reserve. So I noticed that we put it on the capital item, but I believe that falls under the other kind of equipment conversation. But aside from that, that's it.
Okay. That's great. And if we can just circle back and try to revisit the process with respect to the suggestion about moving those items into the FinCom reserve and just find the most expeditious way to that we will be able to address those if that is what we decide collectively to do.
Absolutely.
I think will be helpful for future discussions.
Sure, definitely.
Okay, great.
Excuse
Thank
me,
you.
Madam Chair. This is Joe. We have Justin McCarthy, which I think he's on the school committee, has
Okay.
his hand raised.
Sure. Hi, Justin.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. I was asked to attend the call just for the point of clarification on those two of those last 6 items. So like item 4 and item 6. In terms of priority, I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that those possibly are labeled incorrectly. So item number 6, which is the paging system for Shaker Lane, is actually a more of a priority than items 4 and 5, because that system is at the end of its useful life. There are parts are hard to come by these days, and if we were to lose the system, we would potentially lose the system. We wouldn't be able to repair it. So I think that when FinCom discussed these last 2 items in terms of the middle school phone system or the Shaker Lane paging, they weren't sure if they wanted to fund them together, if there was a cost benefit to funding them together because we were going to be maybe buying the services from the same vendor or something along those lines. And Steve Mark confirmed that we wouldn't necessarily be buying the services from the same vendor, and there's no real need to do both in the same fiscal year. And that if the school had a preference, it would be to replace the paging system for Shaker Lane. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay. appreciate it, as opposed to the Russell Street School or the middle school, just to clarify, Justin?
It's only the shaker. I don't know if you can bring that spreadsheet back up so I can take a look at it, but it's the Shaker Lane paging system.
Right, yeah, which is priority 6, but
Yeah.
you said it should be closer to one of the top.
Yeah, so they weren't going to recommend 5, which is fine because we were certainly okay with that. And 6 should be ahead of 4.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I
Okay,
was
and so
looking
they were
for.
recommending 1, 2, and 3, which we greatly appreciate. And then it looked like there was maybe a little bit of room left in the budget for the school department. And if there was, we would like to ask for number 6.
Okay, gotcha.
1, 2, 3, and then 6.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Sure. Okay. All right, great. Any further discussion on that agenda item? Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Sean.
Welcome.
Okay, so we are now on to agenda item number 7, the special town meeting warrant. Town meeting is scheduled for May 3rd, 2021. Do you want to lead us into this, Mr. Ansaldi?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. Carolyn Mueller's here. Joe, if we can let her in. The Cemetery Commission is proposing an amendment to the town bylaw, chapter 72. There's 2 sections in particular that they'd like to amend. I know Carolyn here and TC's here too. Maybe we can pop TC in too, Joe, to the room.
Hi, Carolyn.
Good evening.
And we have TC too.
Yeah, TC, and the Cemetery Commission also has a meeting posted. Ivan Pagastik may be on. I think Andrew Samarco is at a ConsCom meeting, but
Okay.
Yeah, so we had, so at the end of 2019, the Cemetery Commission did a comprehensive review of our rules and regulations. They had last been approved in 1999, which was 20 years ago. So we felt even if there were no changes, a little more updated date, so they didn't appear outdated, was kind of, something that we had wanted to do. And we also updated our rules and regulations to a more readable and more organized format. Previously, it was just the Chapter 72 bylaw with the headings removed. So we did made them a little more user-friendly. So in doing the review, there were a couple of sections of Chapter 72 that we feel should be updated. The first one is under the Section 14, removal of cans and similar articles. It currently reads, cans and similar articles on lots are inconsistent with the proper keeping of the grounds and will be removed. We're proposing to strike that entirely and replace it with food, alcoholic beverages, and empty containers are inconsistent with the proper keeping of the grounds and are not allowed on graves and will be removed. The cemetery crew has seen an increase in empty and full beverage containers and food being left at grave sites. And it is a tribute to who is buried there, but once the wind takes them and kind of strews them around, animals get into them, then somebody else goes to see their loved ones and sees what looks like trash, and it negatively impacts the grounds. Both Tom Bailey, who's the superintendent, and Lori Taylor, the groundskeeper, they have good judgment on when to leave tributes for an appropriate amount of time. But this update will give them the authority to remove the items at their discretion. And then if it becomes a problem at certain grave sites, the bylaw will back them up. The second change is in Section 20, committing of illegal acts. It currently reads, any trespass, vandalism, or other illegal act will subject the offender to action or arrest and prosecution in court. We would like to add a sentence, camping and hunting are prohibited within cemetery bounds. We wanted to have the hunting explicitly spelled out in the regs. Every year, hunters ask permission to hunt up in the backwoods. And to have this formally in the rules and in the bylaw will take the decision out of the hands of the superintendent. I guess in the past, permission had often been granted, and so it was kind of difficult to explain why, permission was now being denied. Hunting isn't allowed on town conservation land. As far as we can tell, that was the only prohibition in the bylaws, but that wouldn't include the cemetery grounds or the undeveloped land.
Okay.
Camping was added because we were asked to allow an overnight camper. And when we told them that was when we, refused permission, they challenged us to show us where it was in the bylaws, and we couldn't because it wasn't. So we decided to include this to cover ourselves if we were ever asked that again. So these rules and regulations and changes have been approved by the commission. We approved them in our January, I think, 2020 meeting. If the updates are adopted, we'll post the full document at the kiosk outside the administration building and put them on our website. And they will correspond to the rules and regulations, and the bylaws will correspond to each other. So that's what we are requesting.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board on Carolyn's summary?
I just like the camping one. I can't imagine anyone wanting to camp out at a cemetery.
Well, that's what we thought too, but yeah, it was a student that had to, I don't know if it was a project or a personal enrichment, that they had to do something outside their comfort zone. And this was what they were thinking they would do, but it wasn't a student from Littleton. It was another town. So we're assuming they were just going around to cemeteries trying to find someone who would say yes.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you for that summary. Any further questions or comments from the board? TC, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think Carolyn did a good job. She was very thorough.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Okay, so we are on to next item 7B about inserting the articles for the annual town meeting.
Yeah, Madam Chair. So there's 15 articles that are the standard articles that we have every year. So if the board would like to start inserting the articles, we certainly could. You could take that vote to do that. As far as the content and recommendations, that would come in at a later meeting. So it's totally whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Question through Madam Chair to Anthony. Anthony, are you keeping another list of other prospective articles? I mean, these are the, as you say, the annual standard ones, but if there are other things that we've been talking about that if they come together in time, we might put on the warrant.
Oh yeah, this is not by far the only ones. Yes, Paul, we do have that. In the next meeting, we would be incorporating all of those. The Cemetery Commission now would be another article that we bring forward in the next meeting. So.
Okay, good. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay.
You want a motion then, Madam Chair?
Please.
Okay. Then I'll move that the select board vote to insert the following articles onto the warrant for the May 3rd, 2021 annual town meeting, subject to approval as to form by town council. 1, town officers. 2, annual report. 3, bills of prior years. 4, FY21 operating budget line item transfers. 5, FY21 capital plan amendments. 6, FY22 appropriations into blended Community Preservation Act fund. 7, FY22 revolving funds. 8, FY22 operating budget. It jumps to 11, Anthony, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a numbering. That was just a numbering issue.
All right, I'll take a leap of faith here and go to 11, FY22 Park Recreation and Community Education Enterprise Fund operating budget. 12, FY22 capital items from available funds. 13, FY22 community preservation budget. 14, personnel bylaw amendments. 15, stabilization fund. 16, capital stabilization fund. 18, debt exclusion and stabilization fund. 21, senior citizens and veterans tax work-off abatement program.
So, and Madam Chair and Paul, if I can just jump in, the reason why the numbering changes is that we have sort of a standard numbering format, and there's some other standard articles that are in between those financial articles that then sort of bump those. That's why it's just not in a 1 through 15 order.
assumed something like that, Joe, but thank you for the clarification.
I will second the motion as read.
Excellent. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Glavy,
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus,
Aye.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste. I don't think he's back. And Cindy Napoli is aye. The motion is approved as written.
Madam Chair, before we go on, can I ask a question of the board?
Sure.
I know that this wasn't on the agenda, but thoughts on whether town meeting will end up being outside again? So right now, just so you know, we've kind of asked the school department to hold the 15th of May, which is the Saturday, in the event that that was the direction that the board was thinking. So I just kind of wanted to throw this out there just to start thinking about, and we can certainly agenda it for the next meeting. But
So
happy to
you
take,
didn't ask them to hold the 3rd, you asked them to hold the 15th?
the 3rd is automatic, that's town meeting. So we have
Okay.
that date. So in the event that that's for indoors at the middle school.
Okay,
So if we don't do an indoor one, the way that you did your last 2 town meetings was that alumni on a Saturday.
mm-hmm.
So that first Saturday that's available.
Oh, I see what you're
saying.
saying. I was just
The
assuming this was a Saturday. Gotcha.
Yeah, the
Okay.
6th is the election, so we couldn't do it on the 6th, so that's why we had them hold the 15th.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if there's any,
If the 6th is a Saturday, the election, wouldn't the following Saturday be the 13th?
oh, 13th, Joe, did I say 15th? Joe, did you
Yeah.
hold, was it the 13th we held? I think I 13th, right? For alumni?
No, 15th,
Well, the
May
what's the town
15th.
election?
the 8th.
Okay.
Oh, the 8th, I'm sorry, Paul. One of my dates was messed up there.
Okay.
As long as it's still 7 days in a week, we're okay.
Okay. Yeah, so that, yeah, we should plan ahead, certainly. See where we're at in the spring. Hopefully things will be better. Okay, so now we're on to select board discussions. Item 8A is the Veterans Heritage grant. This is the select board. I don't know if you remember that we did apply for this grant for the Veterans Corner project. We were awarded $15,000 through this program. It came to my attention from Mr. Borowski that this grant has become available again. And there was a brief email exchange about projects that might be worthwhile to pursue under this grant. Again, I did reach out to Linda Stein, the chair of the Historic Commission, just to see if there was any projects that they were working on that they might be interested in pursuing with this grant. I didn't hear back from her prior to tonight's meeting, but I just wanted to bring this to the attention of the board and see if they had any thoughts on a project that possibly could be pursued through this grant opportunity, or if we certainly can follow up with the Historic Commission on it as well. So I just wanted to have a brief discussion with the board about your thoughts on it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it. You're muted, Paul.
Okay. Yeah, whatever the, Historic Commission or the Veterans Agent or yourself, deem it, we've had good success with it in the past. Why not?
Right. Okay. I will, I'll follow up with them both then and just keep the board up to date on what decision is made in that regard. So next we are on to item 8B, Building Department Reorganization. I believe that we do have, is Mr. Mullen on the call?
Okay, he's coming on in.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, how are you?
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. Also, Maren was going to try to attend from town planner's office, and I know that Amy had a conscom meeting, but she was going to try to jump over if she had time. Tonight I wanted to discuss with you guys building permit fee increase proposal and the reorganization of the building planning and conservation health department into a land use and buildings department. So if I may, I have a short PowerPoint put together.
Sure.
Share my screen. Everybody see that?
Yep. We can.
Okay. On the first page, we have the historical building department operations, what we generate for revenue and what comes out in expense. For FY21, today, date, currently, going back to FY20, what we generate and what we spent. So there is some money that's going into the general fund. The majority of our expenses are covered by our fees. But if you look at the current fee structure and highlights our residential values, if we go to the next page, I did a comparison to the surrounding towns, and you can see that all the other towns in the area are significantly higher than Littleton for their residential fees and the commercial fees as well. In doing that and realizing that most times when somebody secures a permit to build, they're generating revenue to increase the value of the property and or to build and sell. So in this case, where we are charging a low fee, we are not recouping any of the monies that could help offset increases to the property taxpayer in Littleton. I did a new proposal fee. Going back one, if I go to Carlisle and you look at, they do 13 across the board and a minimum fee of 100. Currently, I can't send an inspector out the door for less than $100 after they do a permit review, the mileage that we pay, the other reimbursements that they receive, and we're below what the hourly rate on a few of them. So we're off. So I did the fee comparison, what we generated for revenue, and if we moved up to the $13 across the board per thousand. And then a minimum fee of $100 to cover the cost of inspectors and overhead, we could generate roughly another 180K. And that number is a little bit low. It's closer to 200. But if you look at the plumbing and gas line, it actually shows a negative in the drop. But that's just currently how the permit fees are structured. Nobody lists the actual value of the plumbing or gas projects. They do it by fixture. So when we adjust it to them, the applicant's actually listing the value of the project. That number should go up significantly. And then moving over to the Department of Land Use and Buildings, the concept for the org chart. The director would be the building commissioner. The assistant director would be the town planner. In that, we have a new organization with the planning division, administrative support, building division, health division, and conservation division. The positions that are listed in green currently aren't filled or don't exist. We do have a health agent that's listed in green, but currently we have a regional health agent from Neshoba, does a wonderful job. We just believe that at this time the town has outpaced their services. So we'd like to propose going to a local health agent, and then other more pressing issues would be the business manager. Currently, there's no cross-training or any assistance between the departments. We're all on our own silos. We work hard together. We work hard to try to communicate, but we don't have that function. So in the administrative support, we're looking to create the position of business manager or office assistant or office manager. We're not sure what the title should be, but business manager seemed to make sense. So we are hoping that in the priority of the reorganization, that would be the first hire. You can see where we've listed it. The second most important full-time employee hire would be the 2 and 2A, where Amy and Martin both work really hard to get a lot done, but there's a lot that's shoveled onto their plate every day. And being in the same office and being able to discuss it with them, and now having my own local building inspector in my department, it lifts a big burden off of the things that we try to get done every day. So it'd be important for them to get their assistant to the conservation agent and an assistant town planner who could, Amy could use a lot of help with the stuff going on outside with enforcements and studies and improvements on conservation land. And then on Marin's end, and I'll let her speak to that if she's in, but with an assistant town planner focused on economic development, as well as the Affordable Housing Trust and other issues, it would be beneficial. You can see the assistants would prepare, the part-time assistants, there's one filled, one not. Assistant would prepare minutes for the agendas, undertaking mailings and similar administrative tasks. The business manager would process payroll, billing, payment, scheduling, and direct incoming calls. Currently, all the department heads we'd all do our own payroll, our own billing, our own payments. So this would be a burden lifted from all of us and managed by one. We see that as a huge benefit. And then the noted improvements that would occur with the new structure. Current structure shows that, we operate in silos, minimal support, and little opportunity for cross-training. No structure to support the inter-office communication and cooperation. With the new structure, it would modernize the department, provide professional support services for division managers, more opportunity to address needs and priorities of the town, assure all statutory requirements are being met, and the fees would be on par with the surrounding communities, cover staff time and resources expended. I know I speak quickly. I try to work quickly. I hope it wasn't too fast, and if anybody has any questions, by all means.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mullen. I'll open it up to the board to see if they have any questions or comments on Mr. Mullen's presentation.
If I may, Madam Chair,
Certainly.
I've had a great chance to talk to Mr. Mullen about this. Our working group only met once, but I really appreciate the time that he's put in and others have put in on this. And it looks like we finally have an organizational chart that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's great progress in that area. So I'm fully behind this.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Knox. Mr. Glavy?
Yeah, two things. Well, a few things. First, in terms of kudos, I'd really thank Ed for putting this together. But I also know it was a group project, and that was one of the two questions I wanted to ask. Is just my understanding is that this proposal comes here with general support from those departments, so it's not speaking on behalf of Conservation, Board of Health, Planning Board without getting their buy-in here. Number one, and then a specific point on the finances end relative to the Board of Health. I realize my understanding is we haven't got a full grip on what kind of fee revenue we could recover by if we had the in-house agent for the Board of Health having those fees come directly to the town rather than being sent off to the Selbrd. Those are considerable, and the simple fact that we don't have a full grip on how much money is exiting the town to pay for those services is troubling enough. But so Ed, maybe if you could speak to that a little bit too.
Sure. So getting to host the last Board of Health meeting, I got a chance to speak with Chair Lisa Flanagan, and she did reach out to the Selbrd Boards of Health and ask some in-depth questions. And we got some answers back actually earlier this evening. And so Lisa and I did some quick math, and the total revenue just from the numbers that were supplied, and we noticed there were still some numbers missing, $127,515 in the math that we did was revenue that was collected by the Selbrd Board of Health on the behalf of projects in Littleton and permit fees. So significant amount of money just there, and we still noticed that there was no tobacco licensing, turnover, as well as the septage licensing for trucking. So we know that also occurs in town. We didn't see those fees paid. So there's more money there, but rough numbers after tonight's mathematical challenge, we got up to $127,000.
And that's above and beyond the revenues that you're projecting from your other fee adjustments, right?
Correct. The other revenue fee adjustments would be an additional $180,000 to $200,000.
Right.
So I can see that Maren and Amy are both here, and I want you to know they worked as hard on this as I did, and we're excited to present this to all of you tonight.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Nordhaus, do you have any comments?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Ed and Maren and Amy, for working on this. I am also in favor of this. The monetary rewards are one thing, but I think I'm a little bit more excited by the extra work that Amy and Maren can do that won't be taken up filling out forms and submitting invoices. I think that given the rampant pace of development in Littleton, it's especially important that planning and conservation have plenty of time to make sure that everything is being done properly. And I want to give those departments every opportunity to do so. So I'm also in favor.
Great, thank you. I am 100% in favor of this, and I do want to thank Mr. Mullen for being so proactive, Maren as well as Amy, for working together to bring this proposal before the board. It makes absolutely perfect sense to me. Not only, to Matthew's point, not only from a fiscal perspective, but just an organizational and productivity perspective as well. So I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Mullen, if I may, with respect to the priorities for FTEs, really, currently, with the town, it's not something that we could, conceivably, I don't anticipate being able to fill all these positions at one time, but so collectively, though, you agree that the business manager would be the first priority to help bring this to fruition?
Yes, Madam Chair, that would be the priority, and it's been discussed with the other department heads currently, as well as other boards and across the board, and I believe that there are other board members that are attending a meeting tonight that could speak to that. I also want to let you know regarding the dotted red line, or the marching, or green line, I mean, the marching ants over the facilities on the org chart. Mr. Anasaldi and I have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with the school department, Kelly Clenchy and Steve Mark, to discuss how that moves forward, because they are a funding mechanism for that position as well.
Okay. And so this also involves some restructuring of job functions of these positions as well. Your position, I assume, and Maren's as well. Is there a change in job descriptions, compensation? Has all of that been taken into consideration? I know there's a comp and class study going on right now. Can you elaborate on that piece of this process at all?
Sure, we've talked about it in discussions, and yes, the director would be the building commissioner currently, and the assistant director would be the town planner. And in that, we've talked about what the salaries may be. We've also discussed it with others in the building. As far as the reorg goes, because of the increased responsibilities, there would be an expected responsibility for us to each do. So as far as the common class goes, we haven't heard anything back on what's going on currently. I'd imagine that Joe and Anthony could speak to that. But with that going on, we didn't want to put a number on the positions currently until we had a better understanding of what was coming back from them.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. All right, good. So I see Maren's on the call. I just didn't know if she had any comments or anything she wanted to add. Amy as well. I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak if you so choose.
Thank you. I'm happy to weigh in very quickly. I appreciate the board's time in having this discussion. I think it has been a long time coming, and I'm very excited about the additional work that the town's going to be able to do in planning and conservation if we can move forward with this. I don't think there's any meeting that I attend where somebody doesn't have a great idea that we can't do because of lack of staffing.
Great, thank you. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks. I just pretty much echo that. I'd really appreciate you all considering this. The Conservation Commission did take a vote like half an hour ago in support of the reorganization, but they also wanted to slide in a plug for the Assistant Conservation Agent at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, good. So I don't think, there's any other questions from the board. I mean, appears full consensus about this proposal. It's just what are the next steps? How do we bring this forward?
If I may, Madam Chair, I would think that one of the next steps might be to vote the fee increase in as proposed. That would be what I would recommend as a first step. And then from there to also, we did supply in the packet, it's not in the PowerPoint, but the draft job description that we worked very hard with Bridget on in Val as well. And in that draft job description for the business manager, if we could get approval to send that down to the personnel board for rating and all that good stuff, that would be beneficial. But if we could vote on the permit fee increase, I believe it's in your charge, and I'm not sure that it needs to go to town meeting. I think it's a decision you guys get to make.
Madam Chair, I'm fully supportive of that, but I just think as a procedural matter in the past, when we do fee increases, whether it's adopting them for the transfer station or other things, we usually put that specific item on the agenda. So if anybody in the public, they get due notice. So,
yeah.
I hope that doesn't, we could put it on for our next meeting or whatever the, next available opportunity is, so that anybody who specifically wants to speak to that has a chance to. I'd hate to hear about it after the fact. You ram that through and nobody knew about it type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I understand. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, that seems fair enough. Yeah, so we can certainly schedule this for the next board meeting for further discussion as with respect to the fee increase. With respect to the office manager position, what's the board's thought on that? Moving forward with that proposal.
Again, Madam Chair, collectively, I kind of like the whole thing, but I think council needs to kind of look at some of this stuff too, just to see what some of these things might, and Anthony, I'm sure, has good thoughts on this. Some of these things might require changes to our existing bylaws. Well, they certainly do. We've got to create the department if we're going down that road, but
right.
That's kind of the roadmap is what we need to put in place to get it approved formally.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Glavy. All right. So what we'll do is then we'll schedule the fee increase proposal for the next select board meeting, just to give the public a chance to weigh in. We'll circle back with town council on this proposal from Mr. Mullen and just see what their thoughts are and what that's going to entail structurally wise, what changes we're going to have to make with respect to our bylaws, and take those steps. And we'll just certainly supportive of this proposal, and we'll just continue to work to bring it forward and move it forward.
Excellent. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much.
Great work.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Sorry. I had Anna Houston on the planning board was raising her hand, but she just
okay.
had lowered it. So, and she's raising it again.
Okay. Where is she? Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Did you want to?
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I'm not sure if Chair Montanari is on the call as well, but I just wanted to extend the support from the planning board for the reorganization plan. we are very happy to be able to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel in terms of all of the work that the planning department receives, and in particular that Maren would be able to spend more time on sort of the big picture items instead of a lot of the billing and paperwork that obviously has to be done. So planning board definitely is in support of the reorganization.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Any other hands raised, Mr. Layden?
No.
Okay. Excellent. So now we'll move on to, we have reorganization of the finance department next on our agenda.
Sure, we'll let Cheryl back in to give an update.
Yep.
Hi, Cheryl.
Good evening. I'm sorry, I was rejoining, so I didn't catch if you asked the question or just wanted me to give a summary or what your request was.
Yeah, if you could just give us an update on the reorganization of the finance department, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. So since we last met and discussed the reorg, we've been quite busy. We've had some of the positions, one of the positions that we had eliminated in the finance department was through attrition. That individual went up into the HR office. So that position is, we're not refilling it and has been eliminated. So that's Val. And so as Val has transitioned her duties up to the HR office, she's been naturally transitioning some of her duties down to the treasurer's office. And it's starting a natural kind of training and moving towards a treasurer collector office. Debbie and Sean have also been meeting and training as well. He's starting to get up to speed on some of the items that she does. We've already met with Century Bank once and have a follow-up meeting with them as well as we move forward with implementing some level of service with them, with the goal of it being implemented in June. The assistant town accountant has started to show the current assistant treasurer some of the accounting side. So started to teach her some of the accounts payable. And then we've just been meeting quite a bit in larger groups, smaller groups, really trying to figure out division of duties, responsibilities, and trying to map out who is the primary and secondary backup for all of these things.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board on Cheryl's summary? All right, good.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Cheryl. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, we had the senior property tax exemption discussion. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to postpone that discussion, and Representative Arciero and a representative, hopefully from the Westford Select Board, who brought that initiative forward for the Westford community, will join the Select Board to provide more information about how they brought that together and got it passed through a home rule petition, so it could be beneficial, provide more leeway for seniors in our community who would like to participate in the senior property tax exemption program. Currently, those parameters for that program are very restrictive, but Westford was able to pass some legislation which gives it a little bit more leeway, makes it a little bit more friendly to a lot more seniors in their community, and we're hoping that we can move something forward similar to benefit seniors right here in Littleton as well. And so the next on the agenda is the Littleton Sewer Project. I had asked, Mr. Ansaldi had Mr. Ansaldi had circulated to the board the report that had been generated by CDM with respect to the sewer project. I hope that members of the board had an opportunity to look over the findings of that report, and so that we as a board could have a collective discussion regarding the project in itself. I think There was a lot of information in that report, and I really do appreciate the work of the Littleton Sewer Working Group. I know Mr. DeCoste was involved in that, along with Mr. Glavy on behalf of the Select Board, as well as the sewer commissioners, and Mr. Sanders was involved in that as well. But the report in itself, it was a little bit more than I anticipated receiving back, just as far as the scope of the sewer project. And I know initially, the focus of the Select Board really was Littleton Common. That was really the focus of the community as well. That was our objective, was to bring sewer to Littleton Common for many reasons, mostly economic, and some environmental reasons as well. So I just wanted to, bring this back to the board and have us have a collective discussion about our thoughts on this project, and for lack of a better word, just try to get it refocused to what we originally envisioned. And then maybe, give some direction back to the sewer working group, and just try to get us back on track with this project and see if we can bring this to fruition. It's been a long time coming. It's been a lot of discussions about this project over the years, and it's just coming to a head. If you look over at neighboring Air, and what they're doing with their downtown, they're doing in large part because they have sewer. And I just feel like Littleton as a community, we're sort of getting left behind. So I just wanted to bring this to the board tonight. I'm going to actually call upon Mr. Glavy to speak next, but just to see if we collectively can form some consensus about moving this project forward. So if you wanted to provide some comments to that, Paul, that would be wonderful.
Sure, that'd be great. I can't see who's on the Zoom, but I imagine either Nick Lawler from the Water Commissioners, and maybe from the Water Department, and maybe Commissioners Kara Pagasic are on there. If they are, at some point, I'd happy to invite them into the dialogue too. But the report that you asked Anthony to circulate to us, that actually was caught some of us with the sticker shock surprise, and we actually in-house Anthony, Cheryl, Chris Stoddard, because of his past experience with sewers, as well as Chuck, myself, and Betsy Bowling from FinCom, had a little session where we reviewed some of those numbers. And just to recap, something that we were all a participant to, that was just prior to the joint meeting we had with the Water Commissioners, and I think for the viewing public and ourselves, it was certainly looked messy, because it was messy. I mean, a lot of new information was on the table, and I don't think there was common agreement on where the numbers came from and where they're leading us. But to your very apt point, I think now that we've had a week or two for the dust to settle, the refocus back to what has long been the central point of this whole project, the sewer, and that's sewering the common area as a first priority, and as really the one thing we need to focus on now to maximize our and optimize our master plan goals, make them happen, is something that I think we got common ground on. Nick reached out to me, had a conversation even as recently as today, knowing that this topic was coming up on the agenda today. And there's a lot of information in that report, not disputing any of that, but it speaks to a much bigger vision for things that we're just not ready to embrace yet. And it's good information to have, but it shouldn't scare people away from this project if we stick to what we really need to do. And there's kind of two things that are intertwined. One is the goal about sewering the common along the lines as we've been discussed for years and had adopted into the legislation that we had the legislature pass for us, et cetera, and the project we handed over to the water department to manage. But also, and this gets a little confusing sometimes for the folks who are looking in, is our very critical need to address the existing town plant. I mean, we already have a sewer at the site at the high school, and a number of the municipal buildings tie into that, and that's in great need of getting upgraded. So those two things logically, happen at the same time and in the same process. I'm referring to some notes just that are worth keeping in mind. The loading on our existing plan on peak days is 10,000 gallons per day usage from town buildings alone. And that's supported by the taxpayers because those are all town buildings. The common area, the existing demand would be roughly about 40,000 gallons a day. So what seems to be a logical point to come forward on, using all the existing what we have for existing engineering and what we would need to go out and get done, is to bring forward to town meeting an article that supports replacing the existing plant, which is necessary, and give enough expansion room to accommodate the common area, not just in its current load usage by the businesses that are there, but for expansion up to approximately 60,000 gallons per day. That's what the water department's suggesting. And this is all doable within an article that, as I say, would be centered on an upgrade on a building of the replacement of the existing plant. The article that was passed, I guess it was the fall of 2019, for purchasing land to accommodate that, is something that's already been voted on, but we would, the water commissioners are interested in acting on that. So, those pieces in place would be able to go forward with the project in a much more refocused and scaled down form, and make it something that we would support the financing of the municipal piece of it as we currently do through the town's finances, and that when we bring online the common area, that would be supported by the users, which has been the plan all along. I would invite, as I say, if either Nick or Jim Carr or Ivan are on the call to join in on that. But I think what you were hoping to accomplish here, Madam Chair, is exactly what we probably are on track to do, or should be on track to do, and that's to get it right focused on the common and pass something this spring along the lines of what we've talked about before, and not in a much bigger scale as been envisioned by the CDM report.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Glady. So I do see we have Mr. Lawler and Mr. Bagasic on the call. I don't know if there's any other comments from the board.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Right. I'm coming at this. I agree with Paul's assessment. I'm coming at this from the point of view of someone who attends town meeting once a year and hasn't watched this evolve. I've spoken with Nick and Ivan, and I understand exactly every step of the way how this has changed and the scope has increased. But I think we're going from telling the town that we're going to do a quirk and it's going to be, this much money and it's going to be supported by the users with so much money for betterment fees. Now we're coming back to them with a budget that's twice as big, with a standard thing and a plan for the whole town, and the betterment fees are, unless we figure out something very creative, astronomical, and it's not going to be supported by the users. Like, I know how we got there. I just don't think that it's just too big of a switch too quickly. And I do think that there's been some mission creep, as it were. I support the common area. I think the point was, at least in my mind, to encourage commercial development and try to take some of the burden off of the residential. So yeah, and I'm still in favor, but I think as it stands now, it's too big.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Knox or Mr. DeCosta, do you have any comments?
I'll jump in. I'm looking at the executive summary that's if you go to the Light and Water page, they have that whole set, like a table of contents almost. That last section on the bottom right gives the executive summary, which is really the easiest way to look through this, in my opinion. And one of the pages has, let's see, it's figure ES3, I guess. And to kind of address what everybody's kind of summarized here. I think that if you look at the yellow layout, that is in fact, is it 1A or 5A? I forget what we're calling them at this point.
I think it's 1A. Yeah, 1A,
yeah,
right?
sorry. Yeah, so Plan 1A, I think with some minor tweaking, that's essentially what we're looking to do. We're looking to make sure that we're providing sewer to the properties that lie within that yellow 1A district. And I would say with some tweaks and some additions, is that, Matthew, is that what you're looking at, if I may, Madam Chair? Are you looking at 1A and looking at that yellow portion of or 1A is the yellow portion? Is that what you're saying is too large, or are you just looking at the whole scale of the entire project with, the greens and the blues?
The latter, the whole scale.
Okay.
I think that the 1A is pretty much what I had envisioned
Okay.
originally.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at now. I think
Yeah,
that's where
I
we're at,
agree.
and I'll leave it to Nick and to Ivan to cross the T's and dot the I's. But I'm pretty sure that's where we're at now. With Paul's summary, I think that's why he was driving the conversation as well.
Mhm.
Chair, can I address that quickly?
Sure.
Just to piggyback on what Paul was talking about, this was more of a phased approach. It was always meant to be 1A and maybe 1B in this first step. It was just important for us to understand the town as a whole before we brought any project forward. So that way we built the infrastructure now correctly to address any other future needs in the future, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Maybe we're all dead when it happens, but the infrastructure in place would be there for it. But our goal was always 1A. 1B came into place more from an economical standpoint, more than anything. But scaling it back, we're going to 1A and just doing 1A. That's definitely an option that the department would stand behind.
Right.
And again, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, just to underscore something Nick just said, I think from my conversations with he and the Commissioner Carr, having the expansion capability is important for the long-term picture, but that can be done while doing the more limited scope of just the common area, the 1A. As long as we're not losing sight of the fact that you want to have the ability to expand if you need to.
Scalable.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Knox, did you have anything you wanted to add? I don't want to.
No, I think Mr. Gladine, Mr. Millhouse, and Mr. DeCosta hit it right on the head. And what wanted to start from the very beginning was that 1A in the common area. So I think that's what we should concentrate on. And I just want to say that's a great picture of Ivan.
Thank you, Joe.
Let's be grateful.
Okay, so we have consensus on that. I agree with all the comments that were made by members of the board. I think the other thing too, in tandem with this, as well as is the funding aspect of this project. And there, we do have the Littleton Common feasibility study that was brought forward, and one of the goals of the select board in that report is to pursue funding opportunities and partnerships for the sewer project. And I think that's something that we as a board should be working on, just trying to reach out to our, other financial institutions that we do have good relationships with, and just see what sort of funding programs they might have available, just as far as for businesses and even residents going forward to get them tied into this project, when it does move forward and come to fruition. So,
and I don't want to get prematurely ahead of ourselves, Madam Chair, but on that score, I mean, Anthony and I have talked about this, Nick and I have talked about this as well. There's been some changes in the realm of opportunities at the federal level that we're looking into, as well as, the elusive $6 million from the state. That may never happen, despite our legislators' best efforts, but the the federal dollars are a real possibility there, and it's probably best not to say more on that, but at this point. But we're definitely, all on the same team about pursuing that, and that may well be a big piece of making this a success.
Okay. And so one of the other things I wanted to mention too that came up during the last meeting was what to bring forward at town meeting in May. And there was some suggestions by, I believe, a member of the working group, just to bring forward the proposal itself without a monetary ask associated with it, just to see if we can get buy-in or support from the public for the project as a whole, without asking for any funding. And I just didn't know if the board had any thoughts on what exactly an article would look like for this project at town meeting this spring.
I don't know who wants to speak.
I'm curious what if we don't have an ask. Excuse me. If we don't have an ask for funds, what are we doing? What purpose does the article serve?
Right.
I understand the sort of referendum on the scope, but I'm not sure that's going to really tell us much.
Yeah,
I'll defer on the numbers, and I would invite Nick or Ivan to jump in as quick as possible. Bruce, I see he's on here too.
Yeah.
But at a bare minimum, we need to have real numbers to address the current need for upgrading the replacing the existing plant. That's a need, and financing authorization for the common area can be predicated on it not being used until the users are signed up and contracted to pay for it. I mean, because that's obviously the design for paying for the common areas, that the users pay for it. But the other piece of it, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but that needs to be addressed, period, whatever else we do. And there's funding necessary for that to happen.
Yeah, I think it's a story we probably don't tell enough, but we have an existing plant right now at the high school, which was designed for the high school. And Paul, you know the story better than I do. It wasn't operating properly, and then we connected other buildings to it to get the flow it needed to operate correctly. It's not the greatest system, and it's about 20 years old. So at some point we need something there. I hate to hold the gun to residents' heads and say we're at that point now. We're not, but it's in the near future that we have to decide what we're doing with that plant. So to me, I think, Paul, that the plan you laid out in the beginning about building a smaller plant to handle the two goals, to handle the what's connected now from municipal buildings, and to handle existing infrastructure needs in the common, makes sense. Don't dig up roads, don't start replacing pipes. That's a huge part of the cost. And leave that cost onto the businesses that are supposedly coming to town to connect. At last town meeting, we supported the project with increasing the discharge site, which was great. It was a great support by the town. It's a great project to implement. And that's the first huge bottleneck for this need, and the second's the plant. And once those two pieces are in place, it really gives us the opportunity to leverage those two systems to the businesses in the common to connect to our system.
Okay.
And that ask should be a lot smaller than the numbers that you guys see in that report. The numbers you see in the report are for a full build out for phases 1 through all the way through phase 4. But I think if you look deeper, the cost of a plant per CDM, I think it was around $12 million. And that's a larger plant. That's not the 60,000 gallons per day plant that Paul was referring to at the beginning of the meeting. So I think those are all good options for us to really start trying to talk about and wrestle with, and bring forward an article for Springtown meeting that makes sense.
Yeah, I think along those lines, I think we also need to look at the cost recovery models so that we present possible options in a public forum ahead of time, that we say, okay, listen, here's a spreadsheet, here's phase 1A, here are the costs, and here are a couple different ways of paying for it. We recommend the highlighted row. Okay. This is, similar to the analogy I use is assessments, right? Commercial rate, residential rate, where the board is presented multiple options for tax rate.
classification hearing.
Tax classification, exactly. You look at the options, make a decision. I'd like to be able to go back to the working group and say, okay, this is what we need now. This is the definition we need. Phase 1A. Let's get those costs. Let's get a spreadsheet together that looks at a few different options of cost recovery for Phase 1A project. And then we'll have those numbers, and we can start to utilize that in public forums before town meeting, so that townspeople are educated before we go in front of them.
Okay, perfect.
I
That
think
sounds great.
Mr. Sanders might have suggested that approach at the last meeting when he spoke.
Okay.
It's possible. George had a lot of good ideas along the way.
Yeah. All right, good. So,
Sorry, I'm sorry. I do think it's important that we are clear about what we think it's going to cost, and we're transparent with people.
right.
Not that anyone's suggesting differently, but I think that suggestion of giving them alternatives and defining where the costs are going to go and what's being incurred and why is important.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
I think that's exactly what Ivan's point was, though, Matthew. I think he was saying
Yeah.
that it's going to cost X, and these are the 6 different potential funding mechanisms that we can get to X.
Yes.
with
Yeah.
Great.
the burden being laid upon different parties.
Exactly.
Right. Yep. All right, good.
Just, I'll just, final word on my part, Madam Chair. I just want to underscore
Sure.
that for as passionate as the discussions got before, everybody's pulling in the same direction. We all want to get there, and and I feel good about working with these folks, and we all should.
Agree.
So, Madam Chair, we have a meeting on Wednesday night. We're going to push this forward to the working group and get them working on this spreadsheet analysis right away.
Excellent. That sounds great. Any other questions from the select board? Comments? All right, good. Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick and Ivan
And Bruce.
and Bruce. And all right, good. So we'll appreciate that. Good discussion. Great, thank you. Okay, so next we're on to item 9, Town Administrator, Assistant Town Administrator update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first thing on here is, I don't know if you're prepared tonight to decide this. We got the first installment of the HCA agreement payment with Northbridge, and that was $600,000. So at some point, I know that public safety and Chris Donald's already chomping the bit to start getting some work done on Taylor Street. So at some point, you just have to allocate what that $1.2 million is going to go towards. And this slide is from a previous meeting where we identified $400,000 in public safety communication upgrades, $350 for Taylor Street, complete streets, sidewalks, crossing light. And the remainder was a $250 because at first we were talking $1 million HCA. Since that time, and I believe that there was a switch on the water department. I believe thought that they were going to get $350. Since the Taylor Street came in higher in public safety communications, this is how it broke down. But certainly, it's up to the board's pleasure. There is an additional $200,000 that was received, and at that time, we an idea of a sidewalk fund or something was out there for discussion. So certainly, I don't think you have to make up your mind tonight. But if you, at some point, I know that they're going to want to start spending down and making plans to spend down some of that money with public safety and the others.
Okay.
The water
Any-
department needs. Go ahead. Sorry, Cindy.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so the water department is looking for specifically $80,000 additional for that infrastructure for the upgrade in order to supply the services needed at 151/153 Taylor. Am I correct, Anthony? $80,000 delta?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That was my recollection too, Chuck. Yeah.
So would probably we're robbing Peter to pay Paul here. We're just kind of shuffling the deck a little, but I would assume since other projects was kind of that, geez, it'd be nice to put money aside to do X number of hundred of feet of sidewalk every year. But in all likelihood, everything else is kind of assigned, some specific dollar amounts for specific uses, whereas that $200,000 is a little more flexible if we needed to, if it's the pleasure of the board, if we needed to slide that $80,000, I would think it would likely come out of there.
That's what it looks like to me. I mean, I think personally sidewalks are something that we've been talking about for a long time. And we've heard a lot of feedback from residents about the need for sidewalks on Foster Street and Taylor Street. Fully support that. As far as the other projects category, if the water department's looking for that 80,000 that could be taken out of the other projects bucket, so to speak, I wouldn't mind allocating the remaining balance in the other projects to sidewalks, just because, I like I said, we've been talking about that for a long time.
Or in some fund that allows us to do sidewalks, because we're not really sure if something happens with the station, with the Nordblom property, with Longs or whomever, we will likely, we're hopeful that we're going to get a fair amount of MassWorks money, which could very much answer that
Okay.
ask of ours for
Fair
Foster
enough.
Street specifically.
Right. Okay.
So I would make
That's
Can
a
I
good
just
point.
get a bigger picture, Anthony, or whoever's best? I guess you're probably best positioned to do it. I know some of this stuff came to us as a, as something that had already been worked on by the planning board, but to what extent were different departments contacted for their needs, and what didn't make the cut here? Are there needs that are not funded? And I'd love to feel a little bit more comfortable with the process of how we determine, where this money's, how it's being allocated. And I don't mean to imply that that was your call. I know it just kind of landed on your desk in some fashion.
Yeah, some of this stuff, I think a lot of this was done prior to me arriving when some discussions were made. So I picked up on this at the tail end. So I'm not sure what the process was and who needed what. I know that the three that I mentioned here, public safety was obviously, there was a concern there because of the local traffic and will that be too much? Taylor Street, the sidewalks and the streets, that's something that the DPW, that's actually something that Northbridge was requesting sidewalks. And then the water department, their dollar was for fire flow to support that structure.
Yeah,
So
I guess that was a specific term I remember. I just said I wasn't sure where to plug that in here, because I know that was a public safety concern, and that's in there somewhere.
Yes, under the well, when you add the 80,000, that would cover everything. I believe everything that they need, the 330, which would include the fire flow.
And that would bring it up to 330, right?
Correct.
Correct. And yeah, I think they had it broken down, but we don't have it here.
Yeah,
Right.
At the time, I'm sorry. At the time, Paul, I didn't have all the details of all the. Since then,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I've talked to Nick and understand what his needs are.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
I would just like to echo your sidewalk request and amplify it. No matter how much money we get from MassWorks, there's always more sidewalks that we can build in town.
And I will, I'll just add this, Madam Chair. I don't know when we'll see another HCA like this again, but we really got to have a better process in place that's, understood up front as to how we go about determining this stuff. It's just not clear. If a company is going to be writing big checks like this, how do we make sure that we have best prioritized and given everybody a chance to take a shot at, what the most important needs are?
Right. I mean, my recollection, Mr. Glavy, is that the needs were sort of a, related to the use of the facility. You know, as far as public safety and communications, the impact that this facility is going to have on our community kind of drove what you're seeing before you on this list is, you know, specifically public safety, communications, you know, sidewalks and things like that. I think that's where a lot of this derived from, was based on the impact that, you know, the operation is going to have on the community as a whole, to help mitigate some of those concerns.
I appreciate that, but I just think we really don't have a process.
So
you know?
I think you're right, Paul, and I think that Mark Montanari did his best to try to. I mean, Northbridge came to him, or the planning board, I should say, with a number, and that he pushed back, and he kind of put out an all points bulletin saying, you know, what.
And I put in a plug for our planning and building department, maybe with a revamped and expanded planning department. We'll be better staffed and able to deal with these things. You know, I mean, you know, it shouldn't be just put on Mark to, you know, to kind of
solicit people's input. But Cindy's exactly right. This is it was kind of like an impact fee, if you will, specific to 151, 153. Which is why the specifics of the $330,000 for the water department infrastructure was to get water mains up Taylor Street and to actually generate, have a generator in place to be able to supply the fire flow that is necessary.
This is all good stuff. I'm not objecting to any of it. I'm just want to make sure that we have if there's a lesson to be learned here, that we maybe can have a better process in the future, then that's maybe what we ought to be thinking.
Right. So what is the board's favor on this? Personally, my thought is I'd like to just maybe address this and resolve it tonight. And, you know, to Mr. Ansaldi's point, Chris Stratton's looking to maybe start moving forward with some of these projects, specifically, sidewalks in Taylor Street. I'm all in favor of, taking 80,000 from the other projects and putting it over to the water department to complete that infrastructure project. But I appreciate Mr. DeCoste's comment about, leaving some funding in the other projects bucket. But I agree with, Matthew's point. We need sidewalks. There's no doubt that regardless of what money we get from Mass Works, there's always going to be a sidewalk project that could be utilized with that funding. So, my favor is to just put that additional 120,000 into that category, but I'll, defer to the board on that. I'm not gonna.
I mean, I've been advocating for sidewalks since I got on the board, and to try to come up with a linear foot number every year, but I think we need to leave ourselves some flexibility, just like the argument earlier with the FinCom reserve fund. I think to specifically earmark that $120,000 just for sidewalks would be a little bit short-sighted. We might need other public safety mitigating factors that might come up that we don't know about right now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough.
I would leave us the flexibility of being able to use that, other duties as assigned kind of thing.
Okay.
Reserve the right to change our mind.
Exactly.
There we go. All right, good. So we have a revised slide before us. So how does this look to everybody?
So you can just leave the other projects as undesignated, and then Cheryl and we can figure out how to craft this so we can fund this through a warrant article.
Okay. Any other comments on this from the board?
Well, that's good.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. So we're on to item 9C.
All right, so we'll move forward on the warrant article we're good on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I meant 9B.
Okay. Oops. Sorry, let me regroup. All right, so 9D, and Joe, if you can let Cheryl back in. So we have an opportunity, or the board has an opportunity to earmark the revenue from the marijuana establishments. So, and you can put it into a stabilization fund, and that's what town councils, and it has to be in a minimum of 25% increments. So if that's something the board wants to discuss and you know, you could put that into a capital stabilization, debt stabilization. So just for discussion purposes.
Sewer, housing, sidewalks.
I think it has to be a stabilization, but anything that gets funded through a stabilization, yeah.
So we can create a stabilization.
Just a general stabilization or something specific like a senior center stabilization fund?
Or affordable housing.
Or facilities
stabilization fund.
repair or something like that?
It has to be like a special purpose. So we can't dedicate it to just like our current general stabilization or our current capital stabilization. It has to be some level of special purpose stabilization, like senior center.
Charlotte, couldn't be capital stabilization? On that?
No. Not our regular general capital. It has to be a new stabilization account, is what legal said.
So we could establish a new stabilization account that is specific to whatever.
Yeah, vehicles, facilities, yeah, whatever you would please.
Sewer maintenance, sewer facility maintenance.
I propose that we attempt to use the funds for some area of impact, some area that's going to help people out instead of a general fund for the town. So affordable housing, I'm sure we can come up with, elder and human services would be a great one.
So this is for discussion purposes only tonight, correct?
Correct.
I think that we've all probably got some great ideas in our own, pet projects that would like to see this go towards.
Right.
Maybe we have some, have each kind of do a little bit of research and or homework and see if we can come back with a couple of, if we all kind of spitball and say, if we all key in on affordable housing, maybe 50% of the funds go to affordable housing. But then if we also identify a couple of other things we can kind of prioritize and figure out where those, we can split it up, right, Cheryl?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, we can split it up. Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
I mean, some of the, I know that we use some of the cell tower funds, we put it into the CPA so that we can get the match.
Right.
So there's we can give it a little more thought, I think, and I'm just looking at the clock.
Okay. No, that sounds good to me. So let's do that. Let's plan on thinking about this for a little bit and revisiting it.
So we don't want, you don't want the motion, then I would take it, Madam Chair. We'll wait to bring it back.
Yeah, let's do that, please. And next is 9C, town meeting electronic voting.
Yeah, so I guess I don't have to show the slides and talk about it, but I did ask our moderator, Tim Goddard, to join tonight. And he's coming in now. So the board had talked a number of times since when I was first here about using electronic voting at town meeting. And certainly we've got information from the state that says that can be an allowable expense under the CARES Act. So this is something where, hi Tim, this is something where, it's probably going to be in the vicinity of a $30,000 one-time investment for something like this. And having the opportunity to use CARES Fund might be a once in a lifetime with this. So I don't know what the pleasure is with the board, but if you do want to look at electronic voting at town meeting, we would have to craft a warrant article because our bylaws calls in particular with the ballot and checklist. So there is right now with town council's letter that he included in the packet that you could use it for a portion of town meeting, but you couldn't when and if it came to that. So If it's the pleasure, we can work on it. Try to get a temperature of the board on this.
Okay. Thoughts or comments from the board on this?
Interested to hear what the moderator has to say.
Moderator and the clerk too.
The clerk too, is she here?
Clerk on the call.
Yes, okay.
Good evening, Mr. Goddard.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Select Board. Good to see you all. I do have a few thoughts. First thing that occurred to me, it's a little bit of a cart before the horse kind of situation that normally it would be I as the moderator, the person responsible for town meeting, who would be bringing process improvements to you, not the other way around. But be that as it may, I do support electronic voting as a more accurate or efficient means of recording a supermajority vote, such as zoning amendment or a borrowing article. But as you obviously know, those kinds of votes are pretty rare. Most of our votes at town meeting are unanimous or nearly unanimous votes on simple majority articles that are done by voice vote or the raising of hands. So there's a chance that the system would not be used that frequently, or the need would not be there. And also, the bylaws give the moderator the authority to declare a 2/3 vote without a count. And I take advantage of declaring 2/3 votes wherever possible, where it's a clear 2/3 majority, close to a unanimous vote. I don't hesitate to declare a 2/3 vote without a count. And we had two pretty efficient town meetings last year, the longest of which was the annual town meeting at about an hour and a half. So I, wouldn't want to do anything that makes town meeting longer. I do see, the application of it, in certain instances. But, it's not just what I think or what the board thinks. I mean, I'm interested in what town meeting thinks about electronic voting. I'd like the voters to be able to weigh in before we put a device in their hands and I expect them to use it. And I think there's a method to do that. I don't think that we need, to necessarily have it in place for the town meeting in May. And in fact, if a bylaw change is needed, that's not going to be effective, until probably the fall when the AG approves anything that we do at the town meeting. So, with all due respect, I'd recommend that the board task a small subcommittee to bring a recommendation to town meeting. At a minimum, I think it would be the moderator, the town clerk, the IT director, to look at the available technologies and the efficiencies of electronic voting, and to let the voters weigh in as to whether they support electronic voting and would vote the appropriation to acquire the system. I mean, the CARES Act's been extended to the end of December, so there's not the urgency that we had at the end of last year with the CARES Act set to expire. So there'd be an opportunity to go to town meeting with an article to appropriate the funds for such a system if town meeting deemed that appropriate. If that article passed, you could have a subsequent article that would address any bylaw amendments that would be necessary. I do think that the language regarding ballot and checklist, I don't think anybody would be sorry to see that go away. And if we could modernize that part of the bylaw, I'd be all for it. I think we should retain obviously the parts of the bylaw that give the moderator discretion to declare a 2/3 vote, where possible, and the backup system could be, something like the electronic voting if such a declaration were called into question by, I think it's 7 voters can question such a declaration by the moderator. Then you could, the fail-safe would be the electronic system if one would be in place. I know it saves a lot of time as far as the town clerk gathering tellers, and you remember the bad old days of ballot and checklist votes in the gym. It would take 45 minutes to an hour, and I don't think anyone wants to go back to anything like that. But those are my thoughts, Madam Chair. I'm, happy to do what the board wishes to do. I mean, it's your call as to whether you buy the system now, but I think it would be nice to hear from the voters before we do that. And we've got time to do it. We don't have to buy it until, if you're using CARES money, you don't have to buy it until December.
Okay. Thank you for that. So, Mr. Goddard, when Mr. Gerbig was on the board, I know that he worked with the town clerk on ways to improve the town meeting process. Were you involved in that discussion, those meetings and discussions at that time?
Are you talking about the Committee on Voter Participation?
Yeah, or
I think that was before Chase's time.
Yeah, it wasn't on voter participation. He had worked with the clerk on ways to improve town meeting, and I'll have to go back and see what information was gathered at that time. I do agree with you as far as, seeing what the residents would prefer, and what their input would be on that. I fully respect your position in that regard, but I am going to try to circle back and see what information was gathered at that time and see maybe if it did speak to electronic voting. I just don't recall. I wasn't sure if you remembered at all.
I don't know if I was part of that. It may have. I know it was looked at in the past when the systems were prohibitively expensive.
Right.
And the prices prices in general have come way down. I think you'd want to consider things like ease of use. You've got a lot of, seniors at town meeting, and I think the last thing you want to do is hand somebody something that's, difficult to use.
Right. No, I agree.
Not just seniors. I'd include myself in that. I mean, I think we
Mr.
want
DeCoste.
an easy system.
No, well, excellent points that you raised tonight. So thank you so much for your input. Are there any other comments from the board on this topic?
I would be in favor of obtaining the system, especially if the CARES Act is going to fund it. I believe even if we only used it once per meeting, that those ballot votes are very time consuming, and everyone sort of groans when it happens. I think speeding that up would probably encourage more people to attend and participate, which is nothing but a good thing in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the board?
Well, it doesn't sound like, unless, there's a long turnaround in purchasing these things, that purchasing it now, the one part it leaves out that Tim had just alluded to is just ascertaining what the town's preference is. So if we bring something to this town meeting to ask them if they want to do it, then by the next one, if they said yes, we'd have it in place.
Right.
Yeah.
And we could probably have some on display in the
good point,
in the lobby area, the check-in area, something like that, people could see them, touch them. That there are other communities that have purchased them, that we might be able to borrow them, or even just talk to the company that sells them and see if they have some sort of presentation package.
Or if there were different options, we could have a couple of different things out here.
Right.
What do you like? Do you like this? You like that? You like none of them? Whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't realize that the sense of urgency wasn't there. I appreciate Tim bringing that up, and I respect Tim's opinion. And I'd like to get some input from the town clerk too, because she's got to execute. I would imagine, when you talk to swearing in the tellers and all that kind of stuff, she's going to deputize those folks to do that. So just to try to get her input.
Okay. No, I agree. Mr. Knox, do you have any thoughts or comments?
I think it's really up to the moderator. It's his town meeting, and obviously we have to have the clerk be involved in the same thing. Maybe there isn't a sense of urgency, but it is probably something that we might want to do in the future. Just like Mr. Nordhaus said, it might make it a lot easier for everyone to cast votes and not go through that whole process.
Okay. All right. So maybe we'll move forward with an article just to gauge the feel.
Yeah, and see how easy it would be to get some of those items out, like Chuck was saying, and let people, rather than just talking about it, just show them, let them see what it's all about.
Right. Yeah. All right. That sounds good to me. How does that sound to you, Mr. Goddard?
That sounds fine to me. I think that it's a workable solution. I think wouldn't simply want kind of a sense of town meeting vote. You'd want to have people vote for the actual appropriation, I would think. If they determine they like it and they want to go forward, you'd want them to purchase, vote to purchase the system, then we could do that and be in place by the fall town meeting.
Just keep in mind, it wouldn't really require a purchase vote because it's CARES money, but you could craft it as a read the room type of
Non-binding referendum.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Still have to do the procurement.
Madam Chair, I'm curious, like what sort of cost are we talking about here? Roughly.
Approximately 30,000.
And that would be for how many units?
750.
750?
Yeah, the cost seems very reasonable.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, good. So we'll move forward, get public outreach and just see what the feeling of the residents are with respect to electronic voting. Is that the direction we're going in, or crafting, would you say non-binding referendum at town meeting just to, is that what you said, Chuck?
Did I might have.
I don't know. I'm getting tired.
Yeah, I
It's
think a
late.
non-binding referendum item, just to if we don't have to buy them until if we decide that we do want to buy them, either we do or we don't have to get a town meeting vote. Either way, we can do that in the fall. If we
Right.
don't need a town meeting vote because we can procure them under the CARES Act without having to get a town meeting vote, then we can do it whenever, once we take the temperature of the room. But we can take the temperature of the room in May by doing a non-binding referendum after people have seen a little bit of a presentation and been given the opportunity to touch and feel.
Okay.
And I'd kind of like to see a couple of different options if there are options. out there.
yeah.
If they're all the same, whatever. But if they're not, then what the hell?
Right. Okay. All right. That sounds like a good direction. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goddard.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, so next we are on to meeting minutes from January 16th and February 8th. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes, and did they have any suggested changes?
Madam Chair, I will point out that on the minutes for the 16th, which were included in our packet, they're pretty bare bones, but Joe did back them up by he just flipped out an email within the past hour. Is that correct, Joe? Late, and that has more of the detailed notes from the meeting. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we could just vote those minutes for the 16th as they are, but it's should be a matter of record that we have those minutes as well, or those notes from the meeting that are more detailed.
There was no deliberation. There was nothing voted on, so I don't think it's
right. It's just more for our memory purposes, and remember what we talked about and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
And the minutes of the 8th are fine as is.
Okay.
Agreed.
Great. All right, so are we ready for motion?
No one has any input. I will move that the select board vote to approve the regular session meeting minutes of February 8th, 2021, and the minutes for the January 16th, 2021 select board retreat.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. DeCoste?
Mr. DeCoste's aye.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus?
Aye.
Mr. Glavy?
Aye.
And Cindy Napoli is aye, so the minutes are approved as written. And so that concludes our meeting for this evening.
I would just like to ask if we could please, for the record, note Chuck's magnificent goatee. Thank you. That is all.
Thanks,
I
Matt.
got a haircut. That doesn't count. Right?
No, that doesn't count at all. Nope.
That doesn't count.
All right. Motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. Nordhaus.
Aye.
And Cindy Napoli is aye. I didn't even notice that.
I didn't get asked an aye on that.
Oh, sorry, Mr.
We didn't
Glady.
need you.
Aye.
I'm distracted by the goatee. And so we will be back on our next meeting, Mr. Ansaldi, is
March 3rd?
March 3rd, correct?
8th.
March 8th. Oh,
Okay.
okay, great. Good night, everybody. We will be back on March 8th. Thank you.